Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about video and virtual production. Our next hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about what we did yesterday. So we're going to talk about NAB, what did we see, but mostly what did we experience. So we covered NAB as best we could, and we will talk about the experience and what we learned and what we liked and what we didn't like. And so that'll be the second hour here. Tomorrow, we've got Nick Jushishin, and he's coming in from Drexel University. He's the head of immersive there. And he is going to talk a little bit about Unreal 5 and all the new features. And so that should be a lot of fun. If you'd like to find out more about what we're doing the rest of the week, you can go to officehours.global. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you, Alex. Aaron Isaac has our first question from Rochester, New York, and he says, is there a way to monitor audio on the new Blackmagic ATEM Constellation HD models?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the 4ME does have balanced out, so you can do it from that. The 1 and 2ME, you'd get it out from the either the SDI, so you can use a SDI to audio, DM better, so which comes in a lot of matrices, or even Blackmagic's own one. That's another way of doing it, but that'll be the program out. A lot of people would want to monitor the audio like premix, and that's where you go over to like a Fairlight setup, because there's actually Fairlight built in there as well.
You go ahead, Noah.
And then the 5-pin out, so for comms, you can mix in program there as well.
Courtney?
That's exactly what I was going to say, the comms.
I will say the inability to properly listen to your mix is definitely kind of still in the land of Blackmagic, still figuring out audio. Not having this is your mix headphone jack out of every mixer is a little nutty. But overall, I mean, I think they're great. They're a great value. And I think that the 2ME and the 4ME especially are great values, but it's still an odd connection if you're going to put a big complicated mixing engine into a mixer and then not give you a headphone out. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand comes up next, and he asks, when Mukana was announced and started to be used as our platform of choice, there was talk about monitoring votes to see if there was any patterns happening. Has this been done? And if so, what's the analysis so far?
And we'll keep it quick. This is more of a Sunday question. Go ahead, Sky.
The monitoring happened to try to get the response of the field reporters to the locations of the people, what people wanted to hear.
I think this is a general question, though. This is more of a overall how Mukana works. He's asking a different question. And yeah, it's more of a Sunday question. The answer is informally, but not programmatically. And generally what we've seen is that the good questions that are popular go to the top, and questions that people are less interested go to the bottom. There hasn't been a significant pattern. There were some patterns because there were some participants that for a while were working together. We could see that in the back end. And that went away. So that we haven't really seen that since then. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Aaron Isaacs in Rochester, New York. And Aaron says, looking for hardware controller recommendations for the new ATEM constellations. Would the Scarhaway Airfly be a good choice?
Go ahead, Carl.
For me, there's only one choice, and that's Blackmagic's own solution. So yeah, the 4ME will work. It's 18,000, and there's the 2ME for 6,000, and the 1ME for 3,000. So these products are actually very tuned right into those particular ATEMs, so those switches, to the point where this actually has a lot of nearly all the features, I believe, nearly all the features of the software. So with the exception of actually bringing in like media and stuff. But yeah, that'd be my choice.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, those are really well built, the Blackmagic ones. I think Keith Lee enjoys the Scarhoy controllers and has good experience with them. So they're also a solid thing, but I'm with Carl, and I would go with Blackmagic.
Yeah, I think the big thing is the cost. That they're very cost effective. Bill, you have your mic open. They're very cost effective for the basic things that you use most of the time. So if you need to get into fine detail and what's nice about the Blackmagic ones is the display and the ability to control it and define it in a more, it's a little easier for you to kind of set those things up. But at the price point of $1,500 instead of $3,000 for a basic cutting system, they're pretty awesome. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, many states and localities term the resumption of large in-person gatherings as a, quote, return to normal. With the progress we've made on building community virtually, why haven't we returned to better and reap the benefits of all the progress?
Go ahead. And let's make sure we ask the questions exactly as they're written. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I don't know that a lot of places are doing this better. Like, this is the exception to the rule. I think office hours is very early to this when it compared to a lot of other communities that are trying to build the same thing. It really, is on us to kind of really foster this, make this better, make it an experience that people want to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree with both Douglas and John, is that we do it at an entirely different level than everybody else that I've seen do a virtual meeting. I think if more people did what we did or got somewhere down the path of having good cameras and good audio, you'd see virtual events become the norm. But when people are lazy and use their built-in mics and their built-in webcams and everything else and whatever, however they have it framed and everything else, it's pretty painful to be in a meeting. I'm in meetings all day with people who don't take it seriously, and it's hard. It's hard to be in it. So I understand why people want to go back to being in person, because the people who are doing it online are generally not very good at it. Go ahead, Noah.
I think Zoom fatigue that people talk about, I feel like 90% of that is because of poor technology. I mean, people not supporting it, not paying attention to it. And so when we spend, 5-6 hours on a live stream like we did yesterday, I had very little fatigue afterwards, but I've been on workshops that are even an hour or two long, and it's a world difference. And hopefully we can keep being the front runners and create a better standard for that.
That's the goal. Next question.
Hasma Gajard, Cape Town, South Africa. Up next, with South African-born Elon Musk now owns Twitter outright. What changes, if any, are you dreading, and any that you will welcome? What impact, if any, will this change have on your use of Twitter? Alex, specifically.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I'm be very afraid. It's always dangerous when the owner of the PA system grabs the mic. Because they can always use it for their own ends. And Elon's been noted to use Twitter in the past when he was just a member to, manipulate the stock market, manipulate Bitcoin, use it to line his own pockets, basically, and without any kind of government regulation other than the SEC as far as the stock market manipulation goes. There's little control over what could happen there. So I would be interested to see what the terms of service end up being.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
In a word, politicians.
Go ahead, Liberty.
I agree with everything that has already been said, but bringing it to a technical side, we know that Elon Musk is an innovator. So I'm just looking at, okay, well, what will this mean for the API? Will he open it up? I think Ryan Holmes at Hootsuite had made a comment about that, of all these ancillary services that use Twitter to help bring analytics to their clients. Like, what will that mean on that end from a data perspective? But even with all of that innovation, it's like, what does that mean from a data perspective? So highly concerned, but then also highly curious.
Go ahead, Noah.
I think it's all about what your perspective is of Musk. And I personally have a high regard for him and his entrepreneurial spirit and what he's doing. Sounds like some people have hesitation with that, which is totally fine. It's kind of a political game in that sense of, like, some people love him, some people hate him, and that's going to happen. I think his intention, or what his stated intention at least, is a positive thing of opening up the algorithms and trying to have more transparency and have less blocking of speech in that sense. Because yes, Twitter is a private platform, and those who hold the keys control what's on Twitter ultimately.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that there could be a trend of him trying to go private with everything that he owns. Take everything off outside of the SEC. So I think that this is a trend that he may try to attempt. He already talked about in the past, is getting Tesla off the list, pulling everything back in. So we'll see if he's actually successful. One of the hard parts about owning a company outright is stock options are a huge. What he really risks is bleeding huge numbers of his engineers, because there's just your salary, so you're either going to have to pay your engineers and your employees a lot more, or you're going to have to just, or they're going to leave, they're going to leave for places that have stock options. I mean, that is how the whole thing runs here. So I think that's the big thing, is hanging on to talent is going to be very difficult for Twitter. As far as what he's going to change, I think that real person identification, basically certifying almost everybody that's posting, I think is a good idea. I think that's one of the problems. I think he's more likely to close the API down as opposed to opening it back up, because that's the opened API is part of what makes all this, makes all the bots possible. And so I think that, he could increase some friction there, and it would probably make it less prolific, but more valuable, as a content piece. So if he gets to a point where you get 2-factor authentication every time you want to tweet something, like that changes Twitter forever, like in a good way. Like it's, like if he did 2-factor authentication with every tweet, it's a little harder to do that. You would have a Twitter 2-factor, program or whatever, but it'd be very hard for, to automate. And that would, I got to tell you, there's a lot of automation, it's built into how things get tweeted, and just saying, hey, this is a personal communication platform, not you can't, I don't think they should allow you to schedule tweets. I don't think they should allow you to, I think it should be something that a physical person puts that thing out there, and it would make the quality of the content go way up inside of the platform if it was harder to use. So I think it'll be interesting to see if he actually goes down that path. As far as my behavior will be the same. Like, I don't think he's going to do anything that's going to dramatically change Twitter. I don't, I think that it's a big boat. It's hard to turn. So if it does, I'll go somewhere else. But right now, I think that I don't see my behavior changing any significantly anytime soon until I've seen it for a long time and decided whether it's a good idea or not. There's a lot of other platforms that I'm still on. I don't use them as much because it's not so much that I have a value opinion about them. They make me stressed. Twitter, I've basically filtered out so many comments and blocked so many things that it's quite nice. I follow a lot of great people. Most of my Twitter feed is awesome. And so, because there's like 150 terms that are mostly related to politics that don't show up on my feed ever. And it's quite nice. And next question.
Next one comes from Jonas Ischer in Karlsruhe, Germany. And he says, how do you operate a camera jib? How many people are needed? How do you control the head? And how fast can you learn it? And so forth.
Go ahead, Bill.
There's a lot of it depends in there. And let's talk about large and small jibs, because you can get really small jibs that are really relatively easy to learn. There also is a lot of automation going into even the small jibs, so that as the long end of the jib arcs through space, there are some interesting things that happen. And if you don't learn how to operate them, if you don't practice a good little bit beforehand, it's really easy to mess up shots with that. On the really big ones that you see on large scale things, it has a massive amount of weight in the back. Usually the jib's position is handled by the jib operator who is moving that physically. It smooths out the heavier the jib gets, so sometimes it's easier with the big ones than the small ones, but there is usually also a pan tilt control that operator has to be careful about using at the same time. So as the head with the camera arcs around, keeping it on the person and making sure the framing stays consistent is a real art, and the people who do this practice hours and hours and hours to get it perfect, but the simple ones can be purchased and learned, and you can get into this if you'd like to make some beautiful shots.
Go ahead, George.
So Bill covered a lot of it. So yes, the camera pan tilt head, a heavy duty tripod. Generally, they're very large wheels that you could move around, let's say a ballroom. As far as the operator, it's not owned by an AV company or production company. It's generally a one-man operation or a company that just specifically does jib. Again, you have to also have a great jib operator for live events, because generally they know where to go get those shots, and you don't have to tell them where to go. You give them direction, yes, but they generally get you what you need ahead of time.
You go ahead, Sky.
I have a small one, and to get a little 6-foot sweep across something or a high POV of something, it's quite nice. But I've also worked with the larger ones, and they can be the massive concert and or large sweeping things, which do require a lot more crew and talent and time. So it's a depends. Can you start with a smaller rig? Sure, give it a shot.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I go back to using Jimmy Jibs, which was an analog device that you just had a couple of handles with weights on them. It usually takes two people, one to deal with the motion and the other pull focus.
Yeah, I think that almost all of the I've never seen two people run a jib. To be honest with you, it's always been one. You have maybe on focus, but it's not. For most of the shots that we use for live shows, everything's in focus because it's in a really wide angle lens. That's there, and they find the focus for the subject matter. For film, you're right that you need to pull focus on it, but you pull focus on every camera on film. So there's somebody pulling focus on every camera on film, and same with jib. But with live events, usually the jib sits inside of a very wide angle lens. And what I will say about it is that it's really hard to it's really hard to get a jib that's worth it. I have spent many different prices on jibs, and I would say that everything from a couple $100 up to $20,000. And I will say that about $3,000, $2,000 to $3,000 is the point where you start getting a jib that you can actually use. So anyway, in my opinion, and that doesn't have a remote head. That's just as Sky was talking about, a little one. I think it takes hours to get good at simple shots that are very impressive. Big rises up over things, coming down over things. The most useful thing that I've used jibs for is just a small jib in a location to get specific angles, because you're not moving the tripod all the time. Like you're not having to do a reset. You just move the jib to where it needs to go. And one of the things you can add a lot of value to a live show is that you now have a jib that basically gives you the effect of 20 or 30 different cameras, because it can just be locked off over here or locked off over there, maybe do some small moves. So even if you're not moving the jib, you can get better shots and find more shots than you would with a lock off. So the jib gives you a lot of opportunity there. So those are the things to think about. To be really good at a jib, years. Like years of practice. One of the things that we had a jib operator once told me that the best thing to do to train is to get a chicken. He said, just chase that chicken or keep that chicken framed. Like you just let that chicken go and just put it out in a parking lot and try to keep it framed. And he goes, you'll get real good at doing it, because what it does is it requires you to use, because the problem with a jib is that you have to think about the position of it, but you're also thinking about zoom, and you're also thinking about framing, and you're moving a camera head as well as moving it. And he goes, and it just takes hours and hours and hours. There's nothing different than learning how to play the guitar or the keyboard or the jib. And it just takes time to naturally react to what you need to do, knowing where you need to get to, and your body just does what it needs to do to get there. And that takes years to do it. Next question.
Tim Mann in Melbourne, Australia is up next. He says, is there a difference between Ethernet cabling T568A and T568B when using it for standard networking?
Go ahead, John.
TIA is Telecommunication Industry Association, and all that the difference between the A and B pinouts are the pinouts of the conductors in the cable. And in the old days, all we use is 1, 2, 3, and 6. So transmit is plus and minus 1 and 2, and then 3 and 6 is the receive side. So if you know that, and you set a standard, but most of the networking that I've done in the last 30 years has all been B.
There you go. The next question. Oh, sorry, Kenneth. I'm sorry.
That's fine. There's not much more to be said. Yes, there is a difference, and no, it doesn't matter.
Next question.
Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota says, what music service or services are you using to get tunes for your project?
Go ahead, Liberty.
We use Pond 5. Some of the editors will use Artlist, Envato Elements, but I highly encourage, when you are looking and you find some sounds that work really well for you, to build a relationship, because it tells you who creates the sounds. Build a relationship with them, because if you are in a certain space, sometimes the sounds begin to get monotonous, even across all these different platforms. So we've also built relationships with producers and asked them for content.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Usually original sound or original music works best because you can score it. But if you're looking for something, Envato I like to use because they provide music stems. So you can really develop a relationship with the script and as it's going along and move it up and down. You can do some amazing things with stock music. So don't give up on it.
Go ahead, Bill.
And I've had about probably 10 different stock libraries over the course of my career. And what happens is you mine it for a while, then you start getting bored with the content in that stock library. Also, trends change. So for a while, everything sounded a little kind of like narrator tracks. It was pushed in the background. But then some people wanted stronger stuff, so we moved to a library that was more contemporary, had more of today's sounds. But after a while, that gets old. So it's just a moving target. And there's constantly new libraries, and some of them are fabulous now. So sometimes you can hardly tell it's stock. If somebody says, though, that sounds stocky, bad comment.
Go ahead, Sky.
Smart Sound. I like it because it comes in stems, and you can also shrink it or extend it because it's got software that allows you to do that. And it's they also have musicians that are bringing in new material all the time. So you can buy either one song or the entire library.
Yeah, my favorite right now is Epidemic Sound, and Epidemic Sound has a unique feature, which is that they pre-clear for YouTube and other social networks. And so the problem with that I had with Pond 5 and a lot of the other ones is that everybody buys them and then they claim their own content on YouTube, not really thinking about the Pond 5 content or whatever they have. But now that's part of it. That's part of the thing. And so what Epidemic Sound does is they claim it, and then as long as you are subscribed when you posted it, and I don't know how they figured this out, but as long as you're subscribed when they post it, you can stop your subscription, and all your old stuff remains, okay. It's mostly, but you have to have your subscription while you're using it, and it comes in stems. You get 4 to 6 stems per song. It's an incredible library that's constantly getting better, and it's modern. It comes out of Sweden, so you know that there's a lot of modern stuff going on. I don't know what it's Sweden. ABBA started a whole chain reaction. I watched a whole documentary about this, and so there's a lot of producers in Sweden, and they know what they're doing. There's probably more of them than artists, it seems like, and so so there's a lot of content that comes out, and it seems like there's every version of what I'm looking for is there, and if I don't like it, I can go and I'll pull the drums down, or I've done a bunch of stuff where I throw it in there, pull the drums back, move this up, move this around with the stems, and put it out. The client's really happy, and it sounds original, more original than a lot of the other stuff that's out there. And then when I don't do that, I build stuff in very simple things. I'm not a musician, but I build stuff with loops and samples inside of. It used to be GarageBand for a long time, but now Logic. It's not hard. Learning the basic construction of these things is something that really is a superpower when it comes to making, I need a little bed behind this. I can go in and grab. I mean, there's so many samples that come with Logic. You can build all kinds of things relatively quickly and easily. Next question.
Keenan Campbell in Princeton, Illinois is up next. He says, why is the audio not ducked out in the start of the show? The whispering seems very unprofessional and strange. Wouldn't it be a more polished production to have music or silence?
10 seconds each. This is a Sunday question, so we'll just cut through it real quick. Go ahead, Dennis.
I'm hoping that we will actually get a video open and music on the credits in time, because, like you say, I think that will be more professional.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree 100%, Keenan. I hate the whispering. It's just me. I'm a little weird about that, but it's nice to see somebody out there that thinks the same way I do.
I'm afraid that I love it. like I like it as much as I like. I really enjoy it, and I get a lot of comments about how people go like, "That is the funniest thing." Like when you get it right, especially at the end, I get a lot of great comments about it. I just wish people just have to get good at whispering. So anyway, but I think that adding something organic and fun to a show is. I'm not trying to build something that looks like broadcast. I think that's old. It's old thinking. So I think that. I don't want to do it. We are going to do an open. We're prepping an open for that. So, but stand by. But yeah, next question.
Tom R. in Irving, Texas says, our company is switching off of Zoom over to WebEx in the coming months, apparently due to cost, see parenthetically comments. Our company is around 700 employees, and we use Zoom regularly for group meetings, webinars, small group meetups, as well as outside client meetups.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, contact your sales rep and bargain. Those prices aren't that you see that are retail. If you I have 100 seats on Enterprise, and I bargained hard. In fact, I even shared my info with Greg Gibson, and he talked to my sales rep and got the same deal. And I mean, they will bargain, and I got that from another friend that's over at Microsoft. So, bargain.
Zoom will never be beaten on price. Like, there's a list price to it, but it'll never be beaten on price against some other published number from another company. So you should definitely get it for the money. And what I will say outside of that is that you have to think about morale. In effect, whoever is making this decision doesn't understand people at all. Like they're not, and people who work in finance oftentimes have challenges in this area. Not all of them, but some of them. And this one definitely does. Whoever's making that decision, because WebEx stinks. Like, it is a horrible platform. And, you are basically inflicting something. And it's fine when nobody has anything other than WebEx. When all they're eating is gruel, then they won't notice the difference. But they've now had something much better than gruel. And when you send them back to it, they're going to be upset. And I watch companies I'm watching companies slowly, just the individuals adding Zoom because they have Blue Jeans, because they have WebEx, because they have Teams, And they're slowly, the individuals are just getting their own subscriptions in Zoom and running the meetings, the company meetings on their own subscriptions because they hate the platforms that they're on so much that they're just not willing to do the meetings, in them. They'll show up when the CEO makes a meeting or someone else makes the meeting in that platform. But if they get to choose, and I see this every day, if they get to choose what platform they're using Zoom. And so, but inflicting WebEx on everybody who's already had Zoom for a year, that people are going to be upset. Like, they may not say it, but it'll affect productivity. It will reduce the number of meetings that you actually have, and it will cause a loss of talent. Like, that's how bad going from Zoom to WebEx will be. Go ahead, John.
I would say establish key metrics that you're trying to track and understand, and making sure that you're following closely to that so you can understand the true total cost of ownership for WebEx versus Zoom. So if you get a huge drop off of the number of people that you're engaging with, your sales staff is less likely to use it, they're not doing as much demos, what is the impact to the business? I'm going to guarantee that cost is going to be much higher than the cost of Zoom.
I mean, everybody had a nice Acura and they just handed them a Yugo. So how long are they going to want to do that? So anyway, it's a horrible platform. Like, it's just, I have to deal with it with WebEx, and it's just a horrible, it should be retired. Next question.
Jonas Ischer in Karlsruhe, Germany is back again with, is there a reason Blackmagic integrates Maddie instead of Dante in their switches? Is that a licensing issue?
Go ahead, Carl.
Probably not. So they're different technologies, really. So Maddie is a point-to-point. So it's kind of like a digital snake. So you have to kind of remember what Maddie replaced. And kind of it's the same thing. So if you had like an analog desk and you're going to record 24 tracks to a tape machine, you need to run 24 cables. Maddie just replaced that. So essentially you put everything down one cable. With Dante, it's a little bit different. Dante's networked. So Dante's really good in a live situation where you need to send the same signals to a monitor mixer, to a front of house mixer, and to maybe a recording or a streaming mixer. So Dante or AVB, it's another technology that does a similar thing. That technology, which can be networked, is much better for that, where it's not point to point. I'm feeling that Blackmagic thinks it's going to come from a mixing desk. So you're going to have a mixing desk. That mixing desk is going to feed the audio into, let's say, a Constellation via Maddie. And that's kind of the workflow that they would probably come across the most, and that's perfect for it because essentially you're just taking all the channels from one console into the Constellation, and then Constellation's mixing it and sending it out to program.
And is Mateo here? I don't think he's here. Maybe he dropped out. Go ahead, Courtney.
It may have been the reason they have Maddie may have been a holdover from Fairlight, because Fairlight was originally a turnkey workstation with software and hardware that they had their own DSP boards and a PC, and it had Maddie interface so that you could run mics, like Carl said, from a studio into the control room. And it was used for that, and they all had Maddie input. So it may have just been a holdover from the Blackmagic acquisition, and to keep it compatible with that old hardware and support for Fairlight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Carl and Courtney. It's mainly for studio consoles. That's where I've seen it and used it, but it's so yesterday. So I'm surprised that they're innovating with something that's an old technology.
It's free. It doesn't cost any. It doesn't cost. Dante's got a licensing fee, and no one's gonna. You don't want to pay for it. But otherwise, the implementation of Maddie on the Constellations is so frustrating that I try to just ignore that it exists. Next question.
Matteo Benzeri in Annecy, France says, dear panelists, having to film and stream a small budget event with 4 panelists, a moderator, and 60 attendees in a restaurant. What is your advice and material to ensure good audio video quality, both in the room and online? Thank you.
Go ahead, Liberty.
I'll focus on more of a high level perspective of course, having a wide shot on your panelists, having a shot on the audience, because if you're streaming it online, and I'll shift here, is making sure that if there's somehow a community manager that continues to engage with the people online. We've all been there where you're just basically a fly on the wall. I know you're saying a small budget, but you want to think about, well, what's the end goal of this? Is it the focus on the people on site, or is it also to ensure that your audience is also engaged with it? Because if that's the case, you want to make sure that you've allocated, even if it's a volunteer or someone on your team, to ensure that they are engaged and you're interacting with them.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Buy out the restaurant. Make sure that they're not trying to serve food to other people outside in the next room or whatever during your shoot. And if that is the case, that they can't buy out the restaurant if it's going to be open, make sure you go out and rent you a sound devices, mix pre 6 or 10, and record everything on ISOs and use noise assist to reduce the noise for the stream and record the ISOs raw. And also, Mix Assist will help you as well in balancing those microphones in a free-for-all panel with 4 panelists who could chime in at any moment.
Go ahead, Carl.
So restaurants are classically dimly lighted, so you kind of want to bring in as much light as you can without being obstructive. And also, if you need to project audio into the room, so if you need a PA, make sure those PAs are not level with the presenters, panelists. Make sure they're in front of, it gets feedback. And if you can use headset mics on them, just getting that microphone as close as possible will allow you to get your gain down as much to stop feedback in the room. Because that's, if you're pumping audio into the room, and restaurants are very rarely softly furnished. They usually have a lot of hard, sharp glass, a lot of brick walls. It means that you're going to get a lot of sound bouncing back to your panelists. That's not a problem. Just make sure their mic is as close to their mouth as possible. So headsets are really good for that. Even the moderator. If you're going to have questions from the room, so mics in the room, try to avoid that. Make sure those mics are down unless someone's speaking to them, then pull them up and then pull them back down because they're going to be in front of the PAs. So you have to kind of be careful with that. It's better to use a supercardioid with those because their null points can be generally pointed towards the speakers, not a SM58. So you want to use a beta version of the 58, which has 2 null points instead of 1 null point. Just lots of little things. Like restaurants are really tricky. We have a film festival here in Australia that's done inside restaurants, goes all around Australia, and it's really tricky to actually get the audio right because they're just so bright. Restaurants are very bright as far as just their furnishings.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, I'm just going to second on the audio, and then also your connection. Realizing you've got 2 different systems going on there. You've got the inside the restaurant. If you're amplifying that for the 60 people in the room, that's a challenge and it's its own mix, but also what's going out. So how can you get the signal outside and make sure you got good signal going in that direction as well? But to Carl's point, getting anybody that is supposed to be heard on a microphone that they don't have to think about and you don't have to adjust it for them, that I would say that's almost critical.
Go ahead, Bill.
A lot of people hit it. It's the sound. It's the clinking of cutlery and everything else that just makes it a nightmare sound field. So pay attention to sound.
Go ahead, Noah.
Hardline internet, lighting, 2+ cameras, microphone is close to the source, ideally wired mics, and speaker reinforcement.
Yep. I'm always surprised that restaurants don't put more thought into sound. As someone who thinks about sound a lot, I won't go to a restaurant that's loud. Like I just go in. I'll eat there once because I showed up. But then after that, if it's loud and I feel like I can hear everything, which I have a problem with, I just never go back. And so it's just an interesting. There's some restaurants in San Francisco that have thought about it, and they have things that look like beams that go across the ceiling, but they're really just absorbers. And it took me a little while to realize it, and I realized that I couldn't hear anyone past my table, and so I used to go there all the time. So because it was just like, it was nice and quiet and you felt very, very intimate. And I'm just always surprised that restaurants don't think about that. I guess, they know a lot about food and not much about sound. Next question.
Todd Raines in Allen, Texas is up next. I'm slated to be interviewed by Steve Nathans Kelly of Stream Media Producer. It is focused on my live wood turning demonstration and production using Blackmagic Design ATEM and Studio 4K. Any advice as I prep?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Sounds like a job for PTZ, and I'll yield the rest of my time to the next answerer.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would say get the timing down, run a show. I know that Todd's pro. I mean, he does this education for a living, so he's got the angles, and I would rehearse. And it's kind of like the cooking shows where, you pull it out and it's like, is this going to be a 30-hour thing where you got to stain it and it's going to take curing time? So just have that stuff ready to pop as a finished product if it is going to take longer than the duration of the show. And then just good audio, of course, having a great mic, and then just know ahead of time, if you can, some of the questions that are going to be asked so that you can have them prepped and ready so that you can either cut to a still with the ATEM, have some of those things ready in a presentation so you can just push a button, pop right to it. So those would be some tips.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that when someone interviews me, that's why I kind of have a you around me. And Todd, I know that you have a similar setup where you've got lots of stuff at your fingertips, but I try to have lots of things at my fingertips that I can just reach over and show something, or reach over and grab something to talk about those things, because it just makes it a lot easier. You're just going to dance with whatever they ask you as well. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand, is up again with Resolve has Fairlight built in. Given it's on Linux, which I'm on right now as my Mac has died, RIP, my mid-2014 RMBP, can I use a MIDI-only keyboard in Fairlight like I would in some of the native instruments software, for example?
Go ahead, Carl.
So you can use it, but the way you'll have to use it through is VST. So you'll need to have Contact as your VST, and inside Contact you can have your library of whatever type of instruments you want. Now the thing is, Fairlight doesn't recognize MIDI itself, so it doesn't record MIDI like Logic would, but it will record the output of Contact. So Contact as a VST will generate an output, so you can play your MIDI keyboard into Contact, which is loaded up as VST, then you record that out as a channel. So essentially, it's kind of like, if you think of it in a way, you're actually playing an instrument inside of an effect. That effect is the actual instrument, but you can't actually record the MIDI out. So there's no MIDI channels out like you'd get in Logic. So Logic can record the sound of the virtual instrument, and you can also record the MIDI channels, the actual MIDI notes. So that doesn't work, but you can actually record the audio output of Contact. So whatever software is, it will work.
Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, here on the panel, says, looking for suggestions on a time-lapse camera and settings. He needs to shoot a building going up next door.
Go ahead, John.
So on the low end, there's the WISE cameras, and then the high end, which is what I use for the rocket, the building of the rocket, is Axis, AXIS. They build the best cameras on the planet, and they turn on when they see motion. So they start capturing frames upon motion. They have built-in web server, Telnet, FTP, all built into the camera. They're fantastic. They're expensive.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I know that Mickey actually did this exact exercise and over several months. And so you have to worry about security and power and storage and all of that. And so I suggested an organization called Eagle Eye Network, and I put that in the Mukana link. But it, again, Mickey, I think would be a resource of doing this exact project.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, first time ever I've actually done this. And my question is also, what would be the interval that work gets you the best results? And would you time it for the same time of day and shift it for the season so that the sun is always in the same position? Maybe that's going a little too far.
No, I think that it depends on how long. Is it going to be a year, or is it going to be 6 months? Do you know?
Year.
I do think that figuring out the interval, if taking it 8 every day, although I would probably take it a couple times a day. You know, like if I was going to do it, I would set up a bunch of intervals, like every hour during daylight times, to do that. And now you can think about whether you shift it. And one thing to think about is whether the camera's capturing it locally or whether you're just taking a feed out of that camera and capturing that frame with software, which I think would probably be a better solution. Now, the company that makes a lot of these construction cameras is called Brino. I think they have a 4K version that has come out. BRINNO, I think, is the company that we've used in the past. But on shorter time lapses, I actually shoot video. And the reason I shoot video is because I want all those frames to put motion blur back in because it looks so cool. So, but you could also, you just need 4 or 5 frames, but on either side. So what you do is, actually, with the amount of motion, with construction, the main thing is that you use a time echo inside of After Effects to blend all the frames, and the more frames you have, the more you can blend that, into it. So you could build something that is it's a really interesting problem, but you could build something that has like 10 frames on either side. So you're still shooting a lot of frames, but it would show motion, throughout the day, and it would look it's a subtle thing to add motion blur, but it looks so cool when you get it right. Go ahead, Carl.
So there's another way to do as far as the time. So doing 1 per hour there's a reason you might want to do 1 per hour. So when you come time to actually create the video from that, you can actually speed up your video by 24 times, and therefore it'll only show 1 frame from midday. So each frame from midday is going to skip all the other 23 hours of the day. So, but you can choose what frame. You can be the 10 o'clock in the morning, you can be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you can actually make different videos of different time lapses of that time. You just simply times it by 24, make sure your first frame is, let's say, 3 p.m. So your first frame is 3 p.m. And then if you take it if you times that by 24, as far as speeding it up, it'll only show the 3 p.m. from all the frames when you times it by 24. And so that way you can actually choose what time of day after the fact you actually want that 1 photo per day. If you want to do 1 photo per day, just make sure you take 1 per hour. And you can actually take more than 1 per hour, but that's probably the easiest way to do it.
The one I'm most fascinated by that I hadn't thought of until Mitchell mentioned it is the idea of shifting every day based on the sun movement. So it's a couple minutes different every single day, like whatever that centerpiece, that center time is, because, of course, 1 hour is one setup, but you could set it so that you're getting it every hour, but all the hours are set to roughly the same sun position, which would be a really, I've never thought of that before.
So you wouldn't be able to do that because the sun will go up and down on the horizon.
It will, but it'll just go like this.
Well, it'll go far, but 12 noon should be 12 noon no matter where you are. So 12 noon, the sun should be in the same angle. It's got more to do with how far south the sun would be. I have to think about that because it's north for us. So how far south the sun will be will always show. You can't fix that. So in Hawaii, there's a time of year where there's no shadows because they're within but you won't get that. So unfortunately, you're correct with the east-west, and essentially, if you're the same time of day, that should be a problem. That's good. That's the sidereal time, but you'll always get the north-south. So the sun will move south.
I think I'm mostly sensitive to east-west because my house is pointed south.
But if you take it 12 midday every all the time, the sun should be the same position above because that's how a sundial works. The only problem with a sundial, of course, is the north-south movement, and of course, daylight savings.
Yeah, go
about that,
Courtney.
Yeah, you could program it using a database of sunrise times for that particular location, and then just program it a certain number of hours past the sunrise time to take its photograph, and it would take it at the same solar position each day.
It's a very fascinating problem. Now I want to do it. All right, next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand is back with another one. I bought a pair of new old stock PreSonus Eris E5 audio monitors, XT monitors. I'm okay with the low end cutoff switch. I've set it to flat. What does the acoustic space 3 position switch do?
Go ahead, Carl.
So what it does, it actually just lowers the frequency in a particular band. So here, this is a band. So essentially it's between 800 hertz and down. So 0, so this has got to do with how far away from the walls. So if you put a speaker closer to the wall, it'll increase the bass frequencies of that speaker. So that's why you put a subwoofer right in the corner, and that way it gives it a lot of punch. But so it tells you up the top here. So if you're closer to the center of the room, so essentially more than kind of 4 or 5 feet away from the walls, you can just leave it at 0. If you're close to the walls, which means probably within 2 to 3 feet, so less than a meter, then you put it down to -2. And if you're actually like within less than a foot, like where they're almost right up against the walls, then you want to have -4. It will change the bass response of the output of the speaker.
It's so nice to have you here, Carl. That's all I got to say. All right, next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr., Washington, D.C., here on the panel. Will the live event camera operator become a thing of the past as more robocams come online?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the event, because there's something that a human can do being there physically with the wide shot of your eyes, being able to say, hey, in a sporting event, the ball's going over here. I can catch it and I can pick that up pretty quick. And my hand and my eye is way faster than a RoboCam, especially from far. But I think some people are going to wind up making that shift. I used to do these type of events. That's me. Death Cab for Cutie is one of the bands, and I would magically see some lighting, frame something up, and I would just show the TD, hey, I got this shot, do you want to take it? And they'd be like, yeah, okay, pan down, or, rack focus that out. And so they would be giving me instruction, and it's hard to do that stuff when you're not maneuvering around, especially when you get some dynamic lighting that you just physically could move and get the shot, whereas the PTZ can't move on the other axis. Like in this shot, I'm actually on 15 feet of dolly track, so I'm maneuvering left and right, and I can get, I have a wide breadth of shots that I can pick up that a PTZ camera couldn't.
Yeah. Go ahead, Noah.
So I actually have the other side of the equation, I guess. I'm a bit of a futurist. I do think it will happen over time. Obviously, it'll be a progression of movement towards the other side. But I personally still own a dozen, manual cameras, if you want to call it. So I'm still in, the analog camera audio or camera phase with operators, right? But I think over time, PTZs will start. I mean, they're already popular. They'll become more popular and better, and you'll be able to actively zoom in and out and do pans and stuff on camera. So you'll see, instead of 3 or 4 operators, you might have one controlling multiple cameras as that technology progresses. Super 35 and larger sensors that get introduced will move us towards that. And then the automation of cameras being able to track better and move better, will emulate what Guy's talking about ultimately. yes, there'll probably be some difference between the two, but there's still a difference between analog and digital systems, like as a whole. And then even in the future, I think robotics will start to replace, switching and that kind of stuff as well.
We're going to move pretty quickly because we got a lot of people raise their hand. Go ahead, George.
So I pose this question because obviously we're back to live now and still doing remotes. So one of the better camera operators in the DC area, he's now doing robos. He's still a regular cameraman, but I was surprised to see him start doing robos. And I asked him why. He said, well, and it makes sense because he already knows what he's doing. So now he's transferring to robos.
Right.
Also, real quickly, I think I like robos. I had 4 robos last week, and I don't have to depend on a cameraman anymore. I could just do what I want to do and get a little bit more creative, I think, with robos. So it's going to be some trade-offs, but I think we're going to see more robos. As Alex said, the chips get better.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
In a live performance, you're going to want to have a creative camera operator, and just because it's a RoboCam doesn't mean there's no operator. It can, unless it's AI operated, and then it's going to look fairly pedestrian because it'll just follow one person around and maintain the same type of shot. So you're going to want to have that creativity. The camera operator will just be on the end of a joystick instead of on the end of a hand tilt.
You go ahead, Carl.
So I always look to Formula One as far as like new technology, as far as their implementations. So all the track cams, which are the 25, are human operated. They do have some PTZs that are controlled by a control room. And there are a couple of cameras that are essentially, they're not robos because they don't know how to track. But I know they're trying to implement kind of trackside cams that are in a dangerous position that can have some probably internal tracking. So they'd be shooting really wide in a fisheye, then it's corrected and, to 8K, and then they correct it down and put it out as 10K. And they want to track the cars. At the moment, they're putting one camera one direction, one camera the other direction, and it's an auto switch. So it switches from the car coming to the car going. That's how they're doing it at the moment. But I know they're playing around with some snap pans in a kind of a 180 camera.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I think it depends on how much is important to be able to feel the emotion of something. Robots are very accurate. You can train them to do the same thing every time, but they don't have a lot of intention. And I wanted to highlight one of our camera operators for the NAB show, Laura Seal, that was filming Jeff, and some of the intention that she used and smooth operation. You could tell the reason why she was doing things. So I think, I think you'll be able to get a long way there, but I still think you'll be able to more feel intention.
Dennis.
I was just going to mention we've been using PTZs on the Belfast method a lot, and practice is producing an awful lot of really good results. JJ and I have both been playing with those and doing music and spoken word things. It's been great fun, and being able to control the cameras remotely obviously is a huge advantage when you don't necessarily have that many crew on site.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I think we first saw this on news sets when they replaced the camera on the set for the news readers with robos. And again, you're doing something repetitive. They're not jumping, doing calisthenics. You wouldn't need to have a camera operator following them around. But I just love the 2 examples that both Guy and Josh gave is, again, it depends if you've got something that's live, not scripted, and even the point that Carl pointed out, though, is you've got an opportunity for both but you're going to miss something. My gut says, though, most will be replaced by something that's simpler or easier, to George's point.
Yeah, the place that we found it is a real mix of the two is what really is powerful. You amplify that you have X number. So I had telemetrics heads for a long time. And so I had 5 of them with cameras. And so a lot of times we'd have 3, 4, 5 telemetrics heads that were controlled by one person. And then we'd have 2 or 3 or 4 camera operators. Those camera operators getting my close-ups. They're getting the artsy shots. And they can focus on that. I spend a lot of money on those camera operators. They're really good camera operators. I'm not trying to fill. I can't afford in most projects to have that level of camera operator across 9 cameras, but I can put that level of camera operator across 3 or 4 cameras and have them get me just the perfect shots while the other ones do all the coverage. And those other coverage, what's great about it is I've got a bunch of pre-programmed things, and I know that people are sitting in these chairs. I have a perfect frame for each chair, and I just push this button and I'm going to have that frame. I don't have to have the camera operators trying to find their focus or do anything else coming in from somewhere else. They just are there. And so the mixture of the two makes a great show. And one or the other, one's either, I'll be honest, I think that to what George was saying, I've done things where we do movie launches with a director and a bunch of actors and they're all sitting on director's chairs. I'd much rather do that with telemetrics heads because I can pre-program every person, just line them all up. And then I just hit the button and it just zooms in and gets the frame that I wanted. And then I can make fine adjustments if I need to. And that's actually a better thing to show with RoboCams than it is with people. So it just depends on what you're doing. But when they walk in, it's better to have a person because the RoboCam can't keep up. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida is up next with this question. What are the actual costs for a team to collaborate in the Blackmagic cloud for remote collaboration?
Go ahead, John.
So I downloaded 18 and signed up for cloud, and I'm paying $5 a month, but all my friends use Final Cut, so I don't have any friends that use Blackmagic.
So the real cost
collaborate.
Gotta go find someone to use it. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I think that the hard cost could be as low as just buying the little $500 ones with the external drives and have everybody sync together. So I don't think that you need to go crazy with a lot of those things. Next question.
Sam Greenwood in Toronto, Canada says, what's a good input audio interface for less than $200 US?
Go ahead, Carl.
There's the one. So Behringer's 404. So this is their top of the line. So anything with the HD at the end for Behringer is the one that has a really high-end chipset. It has the Midas preamps. So this is the top. There's three that have the HD at the end. There's a 202, the 204, and the 404. So this does 192. So this is very high-end, very clean, very quiet. Avoid their $45 ones. They don't have the Midas preamps. So avoid the $45 ones. But the ones with the HD for the Behringer are by far the best, and they're probably equal to the first two inputs on the Flow 8 as well.
Go ahead, Noah.
I'm using a Scarlett 2i2 for most of my equipment. I have 4 of those units. And then I'm currently today on trying out a new rig. It's the Samson Q2U. So it's a direct interface if you don't need a microphone to plug in, but it sounds like you do.
And Mitchell?
I would suggest getting into a Dante. It's probably a better way to do it. Once you've got it in there, you're set because you can route it and do all kinds of things with it. You can also get it in and out of your computer. But the Audinate these modules that they make are all under $200 each.
Yeah, and I will say that if you can afford just a little bit more than $200, I would really look at the Flow 8 or the Revelator. Those are two in the $200 to $300 range. They're $250, $270. Really good solutions and a big jump up from the sub 200 range. Next question.
Next one comes from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He says, why would you use most jibs when you can now use a drone with programmable and live flight controls?
Go ahead, Noah.
Well, this one's easy. Noise is the number one thing. Drones make a ton of noise.
They look pretty. They look pretty when you watch the beautiful shots and you don't listen to the bzzz.
Exactly. Yeah, you'll disrupt a concert or a seminar or whatever you're shooting with the loud drone noise. You can't shoot drones inside legally. I mean, I guess with a permit or something you probably could, but inside, safety is a huge concern. I've never seen a jib crash, even though I'm sure it happens. Right, but I've definitely seen drones crash.
I've crashed lots of drones. Not only seen it.
Yeah, and then the longer shoots, you have battery life, right? That you have to concern. But I'll quote Adam Savage. He has a book called "Every Tool's a Hammer." Like you can use every tool as a hammer. Doesn't mean it should be used as the hammer.
USFL is using drones in their broadcasts. Following people down the road. It seems like a crazy thing to do, but it looks really cool. I have to admit. Go ahead, George.
Can't use drones in DC. As soon as you take off, it comes back down. So there you go. Not in DC.
Well, you can if you make your own. You just can't use DJI drones in DC.
True that.
You land a drone. It turns out you land a drone on the lawn of the White House, and no fun for anyone. Go ahead, Sky.
How do I follow that? The story behind that, I'm sure, is good.
I didn't do it. There was somebody who did it by accident.
I know somebody. I know. Yeah. Wink, wink.
No. It was on the news. It was in the news. There's no secret.
Okay.
There.
Got it. Sorry. Then safety to your point is flying something with blades that are spinning at that height. I know. Unfortunately, I got in before we had to do all of the licensing, but I was not flying over humans. I was not flying over the talent. So there's that challenge.
The real thing that to look at and to keep an eye on is the remote arms. So the Mark Roberts, MRMC is a really, that they've been around for the longest. There's motion precision. No, I can't think of the name, but they make a great one as well. We during COVID built a studio that just had 5 arms. That we could pre-program and control. Because we didn't want any people in the room, and we realized that it would make an incredible show, especially with click tracks and so on and so forth. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. He says the Elton John Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour, and he's got a link there, is using a credit card crawl at the end of the live concert. Have you ever seen that in other in-person events?
Go ahead, Courtney.
You can. I think in that case, in the case of Elton John, it contains a large number of clips from previous shows and previous performances, which may have legal rights attached to them for attribution. So they may be legally required to, show credits at the end as to who created what piece and what clips came from who. And so that may be why they're showing it in a live concert. And that live concert, of course, is probably being taped for distribution later, although they don't have to run the live credits on the big screen behind him in the live show. They could put it on the other show, but it may be the live show. In order to use those clips in the live show, they have to show attribution.
Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. ESPN talked a lot about the Live from Home initiative that enabled talent and crew to work remotely, but connect back to a, quote, central control room. Do you think it will ever get to the point of removing the control room or truck completely?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, eventually it's going to take some time. I mean, the big boys want to hold on to all their in-house stuff. They want to take control over all the servers and have all the gadgets and be able to route things around. But the cloud's showing up strong, especially having a backup. Besides just AWS, there's Google Cloud that a lot of the big boys are going over to. And now that we're getting higher quality contribution methods like SRT and being able to punch that in, and it's just a matter of time before we get that latency down. And we get that real-time communication with the nice 10-bit color, and I think we're going to see more of it. So the master control room will be in the cloud, and people just be calling shots from remote.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I know the Good Morning Show at 30 Rock has returned back into studio. Madeline's been invited to come back into that experience. But early days of COVID, everybody was remote, and they pulled it off from their apartments all over the city of New York. I don't know as it was the ideal, but it was what they could do. Will it stay that way? They're going back into the studios now.
Yeah, I think that even under fiber, transport from one side of the country to another is, over a tenth of a second. So I think that, and I find that there is that you can feel the latency in a lot of productions when we do them online. So I think that, I definitely think that we're going to see more and more production. Will we see the highest level production going to totally virtual? Probably not. What we will see is more and more hubs. We're going to do this part here. We're going to do that part there. I think that that's a more likely outcome, at least over the next decade. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, a long time ago when MSNBC first fired up here in Redmond, I was in the parking garage with a friend, and he was a smoker, and I'm hanging out with him, and we hear this brrr, and I'm like, what the heck is that? He's like, they're testing the diesel generators. So, I mean, at the highest level, you have these things that are like the size of a full truck, like semi-truck trailer, that are just power. So redundancy in the bigger infrastructures is key to keep those things online. So they had bulletproof glass in case terrorists came. You can get into the newsroom, like they locked it off. So there's interesting stuff that goes on in a newsroom as far as backups, fiber, and then power. So
yeah, so I don't think it's going away anytime. Like you look at a Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football or one of those, you anywhere from 6 to 12 trucks, that are all parked there to do that, and that's a lot of bandwidth that would have to go to the cloud. So it's terabytes and terabytes of real time. You're talking about sometimes 10 to 20 EVSs that are all pulling in all these things and that are all pushing those out, and or more. Sometimes there's more than that, and so it's just an enormous amount of connectivity, and that's hard to reproduce in the cloud. So far, we would never say never. Next question.
Next one comes from Harshid in Daytona Beach, Florida. He says, what's the panel's thoughts on the Sennheiser 421-2? Would it be a good choice for, say, office hours?
Go ahead, Bill.
classic dynamic voiceover mic. We used them in radio forever. It has a multi-position switch on the back end of it. Make sure if you use it for voiceover, it's on the M position because the rest of them are roll-offs of the low end. But yeah, there's a lot of voice work done with them. So if you got one, use it.
That was my first mic, my first radio mic. That was in the station that I started. My first radio stuff was all in the 421. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so this mic is quite famous back in analog days. It's got to do with its response. So as Bill said, you can cut off low frequencies, but you'll notice there's a very high out here at the end. So the treble boost, that treble boost is designed to take line. So when you run cables, when you're running through 50, 60 meters of cables, which you may do in a recording studio eventually, by the time you get to a recorder, you're actually going to lose a lot of that high end. So this mic was specifically designed to handle long cable runs and not lose the treble. So you don't need a treble booster on the end.
All right. We are now changing subjects to our second hour. We did the team did a fantastic job yesterday. I mean, it was really quite a thing. We have to remember that we're watching something that has no budget other than just passion. People, saying, "Oh, I'm available. I want to play." And we had people, we had a bunch of folks that I had to go to work, but I was able to listen to parts of it, and I just thought that the team did an amazing job of pulling this together and covering NAB in really a fresh way. I think that I won't call out but I had someone that's pretty high up in a location just go, "This is better than the NAB stream." This is more interesting. They said it's not, not technically better. We had a lot of ups and downs, but they said it was more entertaining to watch NAB through our lens than it was through a studio with people talking and, the kind of the more staid look. So I think that, we have a lot to learn about how to do this. But I think that we took an incredible amount of ground and people just did an amazing job yesterday of putting this together. So anyway, what we want to talk about today is, of course, what we learned, what we would do again, what we would not do again, and kind of work through that. Go ahead, Noah.
Well, there's definitely a lot to unpack. And yeah, a huge team of people. And the powerful thing about the office hours community is when an idea is born, it just gets multiplied and expanded upon. And so if anybody doesn't know, we're coming off of the Cyber Rodeo event. And it took me a day or two to realize NAB is coming up. And it was the commitment to myself and really to the team of do we really want to do this? Do we really want to commit, our time and energy and efforts? Because it's going to be a big deal, coming off of the OH space and then the Cyber Rodeo. And so, so it took me a little bit to say, all right, let's do it. I hit up Josh and Sky, and then it just snowballed from there. And before you knew it, 25 people were involved. And, we're doing some fun things. And yeah, I'm all about all sorts of feedback. So feel free to unleash whatever you have for us. But I do want to frame the show a little bit in the sense of we had a little less than 2 weeks, zero budget, many variables changing. And so if you think of things, we probably have a reason why. I like to almost divide it into two sections of what we know we could have done better versus what we knew we wanted to do better, but just had no chance of with the time and resources. But anyways, that's how I want to start us off. But yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Well, okay. Got a toss from Noah. There we go. And see, that was the pivoting of that was happening. The entire experience was, again, I'm going to take us back 2 years when Guy says, "Hey, we should do this thing," and on the internet with this guy named Alex Lindsay. And then a year ago when Alex Lindsay said, "Hey, want to be a guinea pig?" And then Guy shows up with his amazing set of equipment. And then last Saturday to watch the pivot opportunity happen when Guy says, "Oh, by the way, I've got all my gear ready to go into a suit box, into a suitcase, but I have COVID." And this is Saturday, the day before he's flying out Sunday morning. And so that necessity of pivoting only happened, I think, because we've got 2 years of experience and opportunities that were given again and again and again. And that the collaboration of this community coming together to fulfill a need. And also, again, Alex, to your point of keeping our elbows in, we found our necessity of, could we have done something in a different way? Absolutely. What was, as you asked, going to be the highest quality that we could accomplish in the moment? And so we were pivoting literally 180 degrees about 6 times on that Saturday call and making choices and other people's bringing equipment, volunteering, time, etc. So that was my not quick reflection. I'm trying to be quick. I was quicker when calling the show, though. I was quick calling the show. It can be done.
I think that's the big opportunity for a lot of these things is that we get to learn to work together. We get to learn to support each other. We get to learn to, so in addition to providing a service to our members, as well as a service to the rest of the world who are watching, we are able to, we're really figuring this out, this virtual production idea. So working on these teams, if you're able to be on site, you're learning a whole different thing about how we're doing production on site. If you're off site, how do we produce it and how do we call it and how do we make it work and how do we push those things in? And I think that those can benefit all of us. I think that there's a level that you get by just watching all of that happen. And there's another level that you get by actually doing it. And it might be, I think that as we look at future events, the one that I'm looking at right now is Cinegear, which will be in June, which is all the cool stuff from NAB without all the boring stuff. In my opinion, like it's all the gear. It's just gear. This is for the film industry, and so I've covered Cinegear in the past, and it's just all eye candy. So it'd be a really good one to cover, and so. Anyway, so when I look at that one, I a lot of what I think that if we do these every 2 or 3 months with different teams in different parts of the world, you have Cinegear that's coming up in LA, you've got SIGGRAPH, which is coming up in Vancouver, you've got IBC, which of course is in Amsterdam. And if we look at these things and we have different teams on the ground, but potentially many of the same people, online, and figuring out ways that we can add commentary the way we did yesterday, that we can feed but get better. How do we feed the questions more effectively? Like I didn't know that the team didn't have host view. I was like, why aren't we having the questions? They're like, oh, they can't read the questions. I'm like, there's a host view. It makes it easy to read the questions off your phone. Anyway, so those are the things that we'll learn and make sure that they get better. Go ahead, George.
So give me a second because I'm going to try to give you a perspective from, I'm not going to talk about what didn't go right. So I run a user group in DC, and Blackmagic sponsors and Adobe sponsors it. So every year I've gone to NAB and did the coverage. So for those of you who have shot at NAB, shooting and then having to edit, it's always been a drag. And then what you run into is that these bigger folks like No Film School, they're collecting footage also and editing and going back and posting it. What was important yesterday, it might not have gone right. It might not have been, all the bells and whistles, and what we do in the live industry also is that we were able to get the content and we're done. So there was no editing, there was no posts. We got what we needed right away. So I wouldn't look at what went wrong, but what went right. And it was a test. So I kudos to all you guys that went out there and gals that went out to the show floor and got this done. I think we saw some good things. It's going to be improved, but I think this is the future for one that went to NAB and shot stuff and had to come back home and edit it days later. It's all about getting that content and getting it right away. And I think what Guy did with Data Video, that person was able to do his own, feed into us. I think that's going to be a part of it in the future also, where we could get folks that are centric about focusing cameras. And I wouldn't say we want to have folks in the booth to do their own feeds, but it's a part of it also. So it's a lot to unpack from, like Noah said, from yesterday. Sorry, went too long.
Go ahead, Bill.
To me, it was a fascinating and just heartwarming thing. And here's why. From the very first meetings we did online, listening to Josh and listening to Noah kind of set the stage for all of this, I realized that this was going to be an unplanned, some of it was going to be planned. We did the best planning, but the plans kept changing. So I came down with 3 ideas that really stuck with me. When to push, when to accept, and more than anything else, when to trust. Because the reason I think this whole show worked is because we all trusted each other, no matter who was talking at the moment, whether it was Liberty or Guy or me or anything else, you always knew somebody had your back in this whole back end system. And I can't tell you the difference that made in terms of keeping the anxiety level down of doing a live show where you weren't sure what was going to happen next. So it really does all come back to the people. These people were fabulous.
Yeah, it's a and again, I think that the more we do these kinds of shows, they're just a great exercise. This is the best way to learn is to do it, like in what we do, and it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to always work. But again, with all the technical issues and with all the planning issues that we had, I have people who watch a lot of these things saying this is much better than most of the other live streams or any of the live streams I'm seeing from NAB. So we just have to remember that we were like in our worst version, because the first is always the worst, right? So in our worst version of this, I had a lot of comments about how compelling it was, regardless of all the technical issues. If we start tightening these things up, it's a real opportunity for us to, again, serve our membership, serve and I've done it. And the thing is that there's something about all of us coming together and doing it on our own, because I've worked on, I've covered these events for 2 decades, and it's hard. We get these small staffs, and you're trying to do the best you can, and being able to just kind of mob it, as Noah said, although I said that's probably not a good name for a show, for a company. But having a bunch of people just show up and do it, I think is a real powerful way for us to learn together, get to know each other. Like people always, they talk about, like for me, how I get to know people is I'm doing something with them. Like me handing out cards means nothing to me. Like you handing me your card or us having a little conversation at a bar is like, sure. I now kind of know. Knowing someone from the trenches is the part that's how I get to know people, is we're doing something together. And I think this is a huge opportunity to network in a real way, not in the conventional way that isn't very useful. Go ahead, Liberty.
Yeah, I really don't want us to underestimate the power of just someone having a vision, sharing that vision, and then everyone else being able to catch it very quickly for the rate that this moved at. And kudos to to Noah for just saying, hey, Liberty, we've got this idea. Because I came in on the tail end, maybe one of the last people, because of the Monday show. Well, one for just like, Liberty, we have this idea. Does it make sense? And it's like, of course, this is amazing. And just going through rehearsals and how everybody worked with each other. No one was talking over each other, like all those things that you could have that could cause something like this to implode. And it didn't. That's why when the hiccups happened, that we already had backup plans, because of rehearsal, because of people just being nice and just being kind to each other in that regards. And then even just overall, like this is a prototype. Like I've had visions of this for years. We did something with the King Center in 2013. And to explain, we're going to have some people on site. Well, not the remote aspect, but on site. And we'll be streaming out to Twitter and like doing all of those things. It was inconceivable years ago. And now that it's a reality and that it's possible and that there's this template that we can all now, the Cinegear. Now I saw guys' eyes light up on the screen, like Cinegear already thinking of, what could be. And just that even having like Laura, shout out to Laura, and Jeff and Jeffrey, having also seeing what it means to have the right people in place, because they shone, where they were, and because of their engagement and asking great questions and being able to flip on a dime. Like that's so critical. When we've said that before, when we've had sessions about hosting, like what that means, you've got people in your ears, stuff flashing and all of that, but being able to make that work. And just one more to the back end crew, like you were all phenomenal and you make us look good. So just thank you.
And to reiterate, this project stands on the shoulders of the Kaheo concept, the Belfast method, the Mobley process, the Mad in the Kitchen. This is us. It's not, we couldn't have done this with 2 weeks of notice without all of the work that has been done over the last couple of years of us experimenting and figuring this out and figuring out our comms and figuring out how we're going to call things and everything. And then this is just adding again to us understanding it. When we talk about that where is production going, we are the sharp end of the stick, the like where we are going down in this and failing forward, and just, and the launch is another one, the rocket launch is another, the office hour space. And all of these things are having us slowly figure out who has what, who's good at what, how do we communicate? And doing these every couple months. And I think that eventually this could grow into us doing them all the time, every month, not necessarily a conference, but just things that we want to do. And and we know that a certain number of people will show up on the ground. And that's what happens. We just decide, is there enough people to show up on somewhere in the world to execute this? Is there enough bandwidth? And can the rest of us back it up? And we're going to keep on learning by doing. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, kind of what everyone was saying. It's kind of how this whole thing, started. And when we first looked at it, you kind of build off of what you know. So coming off of the OH project, and then same core group of people, we did the Giga event, and we were actually kind of thinking about it with the mindset of what we had done in the past, and we were looking at producing it that way. And it was a short runway to doing things. And I don't want to say we had like a weakness in host, but it was a lot. It would have been a heavy lift for host. And the previous event we did, we had like a rock star team that they knew each other, and their whole editing team was there. So it was a big advantage, and they could just carry things. And it really pushed us towards sort of remembering, like, well, you know what? Like Alex says, we're smarter as a group than we are individually. And so having the office hours community and being able to have that whole mind trust to ask good questions and set it up and be able to play off of each other and have host, it kind of was a no-brainer at that point that, why not take advantage of this opportunity. So instead of just doing something where we kind of pulled people out of the community, we just sort of interfaced and just added what was needed to augment what we do. And especially with the short runtime, it was very important because, people were like, well, what is this? What's going to happen? The scariest thing is the unknown. So keeping it as close to, Sky would say, do what, play inside the sandbox, what we know, but then add on what we need. Okay, here's this extra thing we have to go to, really helped. And having the community and, like was mentioned, us being all familiar with each other helped, because we've all worked with each other. We kind of know what skills everyone has, who's good at what. And I think that was really how this was able to be rolled in such a short period of time.
And what I will say is that where this will go, in my opinion, and we've seen this on Pixel Core, we have companies that exist right now that were teams inside of Pixel Core. Like the team formed and said, we like working with each other so much, we're just going to build a company. I think they built the company before they'd ever met each other in person. Like, it was, and this is, 15 years ago. So being part of this is truly networking, where we're going to find the people not only that we like to hang out with, but who do we like to work with. And I think that I just think it's an incredible opportunity to really network again in an authentic way. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Alex. So guys, I had goosebumps, and that doesn't happen very often for me, because what we witnessed yesterday was absolutely amazing. You guys did a fantastic job. And so I'm very, very, very appreciative. However, I must apologize to Mr. Dennis. One of the things that we need to improve upon, and I think the real value of us doing this type of a show, is the collaboration between the panel of what we're seeing. Because I want to hear from Courtney. I want to hear from the collective experience from the panel. And having to raise my hand every time in Mukana was just wasn't working. So I think we've got something magical here, guys, and hats off. And I'm proud to be part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I really appreciated it. Having attended NAB every year, this is the first year I've missed since 1982. That's over 40 years now. And not missing one. I don't really have the stamina to walk the whole show anymore. And I really appreciate the fact that they were able to get out there and get to some of the more interesting booths and take suggestions in advance of what we wanted to see. And the ability to have two cameras roving at the same time, so that one could be in transition between one booth and another booth, and all the behind the scenes coordination that pulled that off was amazing. And the ability of us in the panel to discuss, to fill in the holes when they weren't ready to broadcast from the next booth, to discuss what we had just seen, that was really informative too. Now, there is, like I say, I suffered the same. I came in a little bit late, so I didn't know if I was just missed something as far as instruction and proper protocol that was given to everyone. I, like John, was really frustrated by the fact that there was no way to ask a question from the panel or the attendees of the regular office hours of the person being interviewed. And apparently the interviewer wasn't able to monitor Mukana, and there was our standard way for presenting questions is too late. By the time the question comes up, we're already on the next booth. So
yeah, that was a hard choice we had to make. Sorry, Courtney, but yeah, that was a hard choice we just had to make in the development of something that was happening physically in the moment. So that is an engagement requirement for next time, but to allow it to happen was just outside of our bandwidth.
And Alex, tell Chris I've discovered a bug in kind of when there are 300 tags, and there's no scroll bar.
No, Chris and I were talking about it already. Like we already have the Courtney fix that he's working on, because it literally was you. Because I was like, it looks fine on mine. And he's like, well, Courtney has a different screen, and I was like, oh, right. So Chris and I were already talking about that yesterday. So, and again, this is where we start to evolve. And again, part of that problem is that it just wasn't clear. There's a view that we don't use very often because we use the panel view, but there's a different view that we use in other events that we do with Mukana that is super easy to read on a phone. Like it's you just open it up and you hit answer, and it's the whole screen is the question, and so it's a much easier way to make that work. And we've had that for years. Literally since it was version 2, so 2012. We've had that feature. We just didn't know to hand it.
That would be great for the interviewer, but the problem is that for the panel to submit a question that immediately floats to the top because we have a question about something that person they're being interviewed just said.
Yeah, we have to hotwire it.
We don't know what they're going to say in advance, so there's no way to enter that question in advance.
We have to hotwire it. So I understand what I think we can get that done by sending gear. So what we have to do is hotwire it so that if you tag something, it probably wouldn't be everybody can do it, but we could have it be like the panelists at least can hotwire it, where if they tag it, it goes straight into the queue. It just pops into it. I'll have to talk to Chris about that behavior. It's an interesting thing. Yeah. So that the pertinent questions, we have so many questions, it has to sort through those questions faster than just voting. So it's because when I did it years ago, I literally had someone in my ear reading questions into my ear, and I would just talk to them. I would just say it like, I've got a question from, and the key, by the way, is always to say who asked the question. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, we can definitely flesh out that workflow a little bit more. I'll definitely say and vote up Laura Thompson's comment about Josh, because he's rocking it as far as producing plus being the question manager. And obviously, if we were able to divide those into 2 different people, that would be huge. And really, we had about 77 questions yesterday overall, but as that volume increases, we go to 150, 200, 300 questions, what have you. Like, we're going to, build out the team a little bit more to handle those incoming questions. And like we're saying, we'll build and iterate on the system so that flushes out. But I did have 2 more. I'll go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
I was going to say that there are tools that we have that we don't use for this show that we have to manage large numbers of questions. And so we can turn some of those things on, like there's just things that are not, we turn on only what we need for this show, and there's lots, because otherwise it would be overwhelming for all of you to see all the other tools that we use. And so that we can turn that tool on, and we just haven't turned it on. And we're going to say, Noah.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I have 2 more thoughts. I'm sure we need to get to the constructive criticism part of the program too. But I remember Saturday when everything was moving and we had all these variables that weren't confirmed, and we're just a little stressed out at the moment. I just remember saying, this is going to be a giant exercise on how well we pivot in the moment, right? And I think that kind of anchored everybody back down to like, okay, we're doing the best we can. We're just going to make it work. And for me, personally, like my personal growth, like I feel like office hours has allowed me over the last 2 years to really move into like a better communication, like clear, concise practice of that communication over time. And I've never had a project and a team like this, like form around a vision that I've had so quickly and effectively. And it's really inspiring for sure.
Well, and hopefully, that is the thing, is it's not just it's a nutrient rich environment for people to have ideas and have people just come up under them. And, Tony decided he wanted to do an interview show, and he's just blossoming, but that's all because a whole bunch of people supported him. Tony was never going to do that by himself. Like he just, and we get to see this great, he's contributing a lot, and now he's starting to host some of our shows, and just doing a lot to contribute to what's happening. But he needed support, and I need support. Like I can't do. This would have not lasted if everyone hadn't started taking on, roles and everything from being panelists to the back end to everything else. And so, I think that we can keep on doing that. And again, I think that we're not just learning how to do technical skills, which is what you learn in school. We're learning team skills, and really processing, how do we handle that? I had one of the best things that ever happened to me that I keep in my mind all the time is I was working on a shot in Star Wars. There's a shot where the Queen ship goes past over Coruscant. It's a really long shot. It's 239 frames. I still remember 239 frames that I had to render, and it's in the trailer. If you go look at it, it's a big shiny ship going around a planet. I was 3 weeks overdue. I'd spent 9 weeks on that shot, and I was getting pretty stressed. And I remember I walked out of C Theater, which I now work in, and walked out of C Theater, and John Knoll looked at me and he said, "Just remember, it's not heart surgery." Like he just see that I was super stressed. He goes, "We're making a movie." And it was just. I immediately, and I think about that. It's not heart surgery all the time. Like when you get really, really stressed, just remember that it's not heart surgery. No one is going to die today, and hopefully, but for what we're doing normally. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I'm curious that just talking about the question possibilities and dealing with the routing of questions. And I'm curious, Alex, what the other Mukana features are that are not engaged. But
well, the big one in this case is moderation. So we can load balance across many moderators to look at stuff, and so that if you have hundreds and hundreds of questions that are coming in at high velocity, you can pass them. So you can get to a point where you're answering, because you can also answer questions via text instead of via, so that you can basically, you can have like 10 people answering questions via text and only pushing certain ones to the, you can also send stuff to tickers, ticker across the bottom. And there's a whole bunch of other things that are built in that we use for other things. We just haven't needed them for what we do here. We have, anyway, it's a long story. There's a lot of things
that
so
we
there's
haven't
a lot
done
of
here
features
yet.
Yeah, no, and we'll turn more of them on. I just do it because it's another code base that we have to manage, and then we have people then using them, and we can definitely turn more things on.
Yeah, that would have been helpful. So my job that I jumped into was a Mukana coordinator, and I did it manually, and we kind of adapted what we knew for the regular Mukana system, and that's how the direction kept the panel in the loop about where we were going, because they could take cues just for what was coming down the line with the Mukana questions. But yeah, moderation, that would be cool. Fantastic. Yeah,
it's useful. Yeah, for me, the funny thing, and the last thing I'll say before we get going, is for me the stress point in the first hour was not keeping the questions racked up in front of me, because so I need 7 questions in the panel all the time. That is how I operate, and so. If I don't see, so if I'm at 7:43, not that happened yesterday, and I only see 2 or 3 questions, I start stretching. Even if I'm a panelist, I'll just start talking. You notice I was long answers, because what I didn't understand was that pit stop. I didn't understand pit stop. I didn't know what pit stop was. I have my PoE broke on my Meraki, and so I'm not on Dante, which means I can't get into the Unity, and so I don't know of anything else. All I know is what's on there, and what's on there. I thought pit stop was a pit stop at a location, because all the other ones were video roll-ins. So video roll-in, video roll-in, video roll-in. It had to have video roll-in / pit stop would have made sense to me, but just pit stop meant that to me looked like the first segment that was live. And we were an hour, it wasn't 7:43, it was 8:43. So I've got 17 minutes, one question, and you could see me in the back end going, why are there not more questions being put in? And I'm like stretching out and not understanding what is going on, and throughout the entire second hour, I was getting really stressed. I had to go to work, but I literally just punched out at 9 because I was so wound up that I couldn't think anymore, because I was just So just as someone who does this every day, literally, if you break my pattern and you have to put it in the text down there, you don't assume. I can't really listen to the comms because I'm so focused on the show that I really can't have anyone talk to me. And so even when I had the PoE work, and I didn't get into Unity because I can't have you talk to me. Like I can't ever have anyone talk to me while I'm in the show, And so I need to be able to look at it. I can't have anyone interrupt me without me deciding I want to be interrupted. So I can't do. You have to put it in the text. I've gotten better at looking at that chat, not always, but I'm getting better at looking at the chat. But you'll see me when I'm chatting, it usually means I'm really upset because I can't figure something out or something's happening that I don't like. But usually it's because I don't understand. Someone made a decision that I didn't that didn't get to me. So anyway, so it's usually not wrong. It's usually me not understanding what's going on. But the thing for me was in that second hour, it just wasn't communicated. And we kept the whole hour, that whole second hour, we were not putting enough things into the pipe. And so I was just building up and being frustrated because I didn't understand where we were going next, and so I was just like, I don't understand why we're, and even if there's going to be a whole bunch of roll-ins, I just needed 7 roll-ins to sit there in front of me, because then I just know where my horizon is. And so I just felt like I was like right here the whole second hour. And so that made me very stressed. Go ahead. And I know I wasn't the host, so it didn't matter. I'm just used to being the host. So I should have just let Liberty run the show. I just, as a person who's used to hosting, I was managing time and I was breaking all the rules. Like I was talking long and everything else because I couldn't figure out what was going on next.
But it was funny because what we had rehearsed, and this is something to go in our document of like, make sure that the lead host, knows what happens, because we rehearsed it, and it was beautiful at the same time, because this is what would happen on site, is that you've got, okay, talent over here is asking questions. There's comms like, okay, are we stretching? Which way are we going? And right. Going back to the like trusting. And I think it was Sky just said, okay, we'll just stand by. And then, we worked it out ultimately. And at the end of the day, the audience didn't really know that was just all our internal communications.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, we definitely. Yeah, for sure. I definitely could have communicated Pit Stop better to you, Alex, and really the team. But thankfully, in our rehearsal, we talked about essentially, we'll have the content from the floor, we'll have Mukana questions. But if all else fails, the anchors, right, and the panelists are going to carry it. And we did want to make it a distinction when we switched to the third hour that we're going to use anchors and not hosts, because in the sense, the anchors we do need to talk to and give them a heads up. And so ultimately, Sky and myself would essentially be pulling and pushing and directing the show at that point. Whereas like the traditional office hours format, the host would be pushing and pulling and deciding where to go next, So we did want to create a little bit of distinction when we moved to the third hour with that. But,
and I think that makes a lot of sense, of having someone who's kind of managing that. And that, again, it's because, I'm not, we're just starting to get hosts coming in, and I'm not used to it. I'm used to just kind of managing the show. So it's, it was a new thing for me. Anyway, it was, for sure. I mean, overall, everyone handled it really well. And usually if you see me flailing on the back end, it usually means I just don't understand what you're doing. And so it's just, and the time to talk to me about it is usually it's between 6:20 and 6:30. Like if at 6:30, I'm now doing a bunch of other things to get ready for the show. And, so all the discussion that happens before that, I don't know what that means. So anyway, and we'll slowly get to a point where I'm just a panelist. That's the goal, is me just to be a panelist. Let's jump to the next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, has the first one here. At the highest level, what equipment would a field crew bring for live stand-up interviews?
And let's keep these. We've now talked a lot. I've talked a lot, so we're going to have to keep the questions relatively brief. But we'll answer them completely. But let's make sure we stay on target and really answer the question that was asked. Go ahead, Noah.
I think there's something magical to have multiple cameras on an interview thing. Towards the end of the show, that's what we had. But Blackmagic 6K going into some sort of internet or encoder going out to us. Having a light on our rig was helpful, and audio wise, you want to get that mic as close as possible. So it's the whole system that you got to think about. And I do want to say that Guy had a whole thing built that obviously didn't play, and then Powers had his own thing. So we had suggestions, and I checked in with them, but it was ultimately up to them because it's their gear, and we didn't have a budget for them to buy stuff.
Is Jeffrey's mic active?
I believe he had the handheld mic. I know we had some audio issues with him.
Because it seemed like that mic moved around a lot and didn't make any difference. Like I was curious as to what
I think it was on his talent.
Yeah, I think he laved himself, and then he had a handheld for the other people.
All right. Go ahead.
I definitely heard the talent but not him as much, right? That was the deal.
Yeah. I will say that handheld mics on the floor are really useful. Like, for that kind of thing, like an SM58, it's hard to replace, in these, and you just have to, I think that labs in a big space it's hard. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, from the video to the audio, signal distribution, power requirements, what would be the ideal kit? This is an OH lab or second hour with the constant innovation that's going and the ongoing conversation.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, having done a few of these over the years, just solo guy, as well as having a small crew, I keep an eye on what's going on. And when I went to CES in 2020, I took a couple stills, and this is one of those ones where it's the multi-camera like Noah was talking about. And so this is the rig, with the nice sockler. And you notice this person in the back is doing what Alex has talked about at some of the shows where you have people, red shirts here. So red shirt blocking crowd from entering into the shot, 2 cameras set up. You've got, a producer standing by giving cues to the talent. You've got the nice lighting. And then you got a sound guy here with a bag, with a mix pre, with his electro wireless listening. And so there's just a variety of things here that, really at the highest level, when you have big budget, that you start to see come into play. And so we can do it with the mobile, with an iPhone and at the cheapest level, but seeing this and then adding a live view to transmit out of there, as Tom was saying, is kind of the icing on the cake. So it is worthy of a second hour. There's so much here to unpack.
And I think that we used the Dr. Net, or Mr. Net yesterday, which looked like it worked pretty effectively.
I will say we had Mr. Net for Power's crew, and we had a live view for Keithley's crew. Both were not 100% the whole time, but honestly, the Mr. Net, from what I saw, was better because the live view had issues in the beginning, and so Keithley actually ran over to the live view booth to troubleshoot. But I would say both products, at the end of the day, produce something that we could use. So I want to speak positively towards both of those.
It's interesting. The live view has been what I've always used in the LBCC. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I would say the most problem that I had was with the audio setup and a single, as you was said earlier, a single SM58 and instructions on how to use it. Here's when I'm talking. Here's when they're talking. Here's
the hardest part. The hardest part is if you don't do a lot of those. The hardest part, you get people out of sync. Like that's the number one problem we have with SM58.
So
they go like this, and then they go back, and the whole thing's up. We've had that happen so many times that you have to be really conscious to it.
And I think Jeffrey was using his Rode Goes, and I think he had one of the transmitters on himself, and he had built a little handheld 3D printed handle for the other one, which he was using on the person being interviewed, and that worked pretty good for the person. But I don't think his microphone was right. Put into the mix. So anytime you're going to have 2 microphones, you're going to have to control how they're mixed together, and that's problematic in a live stream, especially if there's noise cancellation going on, which there was, which made this horrible swimming mess in the background of all the background sound.
And that's why I like to use SM58s, is because you can't have all that. You just have to have the person talking. Yeah. I will say the one thing I was looking at, guys, and I've done that style where we drop everything on tripods, and we probably stopped that around 2005. And the reason we did that was we found that it felt much more energetic if we were doing handheld, and it was much harder, and we had to have rigs for the handheld person. I mean, and poor Doug Dalton, he did it for 6 hours with me, and I think we almost took no break. And I think he might have had a monopod for some of it, but a lot of it he just held, for 6 hours, a little EX1. And I just found that we were able to produce something that was more energetic and it also meant we could cover a lot more space. A lot of the reason I did it was just because we had to keep moving. And so setting up and breaking down took a long time. And we do still do those for some clients on show floors, but it's usually a client paying us to do it. When we do it ourselves, we almost always do it handheld at this point, or at most with a monopod. But I love handheld because you can move around. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so monopod was the thing I was going to say. So put a Studio 4K on a monopod. Studio 4K's got the big 7-inch screen at the back, so you can actually hold the monopod away from you. For the camera operator, you'd want a minimum crew of 3, so your producer can be the question asker as well, so they can hold the microphone. You do want a sound person, even though they probably won't be holding the microphone. They're actually mixing the sound that gets piped into the XLRs into the Studio 4K. But yeah, I think a monopod is a good idea for like a full day out on the floor. You can have 2 cameras, so your camera operator can actually be holding 2 cameras with monopods and get 2 different angles, one that's tied in on the person, one that's a 2-shot. So, and that can be done with monopods with, you don't even need the little 3 feet. The other thing I would suggest, and you do need maybe more than 2 weeks, but maybe not 2 weeks, is uniform. So have a black polo with like big letters that says office hours, whatever on the back, and make sure every member of, like, you got 2 crews running around, where you can spot each other. And as you go to the booth, people know that, you are a team and you're not just, and they may even know what office hours is. They may have not have been on, but they may know what it is. They may have heard of it. So I think having like a polo with, some design on it that says office hours quite large that we can see from a distance, small one on the front, large one on the back, that would be for next time in these large events. It makes you just look a lot more. People respect you a bit more. Certain types of people from certain types of companies will respect you a little bit more as far as you may be seen as a news outlet. They may like traditional media. You look like traditional media. But yeah, they're kind of the other. Yeah, so monopod. In an MD46. So this is Sennheiser's dynamic mic. It's what's used in pit lane and Formula One. I always go back to Formula One because these guys have to do it day in, day out. And that's the one that's very noise cancellation essentially. And you can put a little box on there as well that says office hours.
Yeah, we had Pixel Core shirts. It said big Pixel Core staff on the bottom, and it turned out, but it would have what event it was. We'd print them for each show, and I didn't realize until we were about halfway through it that people volunteered to get the shirt. like they wanted to have they were collecting the shirts. It didn't, because people would fly in, and I was like, I realized they were getting there. Then I really got serious about the shirts. So I agree with you. Go ahead, George.
So I think a solution that would definitely work, and I've played with this a little bit. Monopod, of course, as already mentioned here. With the mixed pre's, they all have quarter 20s, so you can actually stack a 6K Pro or even a 4K on top of the mixed pre with quick releases. You could also get a battery in between there from Core SWX and just stack those three. I know wireless is kind of not the thing to really use on the show floor, but I haven't had any issues. So you could additionally get 2 cubes onto that mixed pre and just have one stacked rig and just use that as on a monopod, and that you could ease this thing over your shoulder. Because again, on a 6-hour shoot on the show floor, it gets really hectic. But if you get everything stacked on a monopod and just could sling it over your shoulder, that'd be a good idea also.
We used an Apollo for a show where the Apollo will get 4 inputs, and then you can tap on the screen and cut. And we had Teradeks going into the Apollo, and someone with a rig where it just hung down in front of them, and they'd sit there and just follow the camera. And this is in the middle of nowhere. We were in the woods, and just tapping on the screen to send a multi-camera back to a live view, which sent it back, which could be that way you don't have to send multiple feeds back out. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, another possible solution would be something like an easy rig as opposed to a monopod where it hangs the camera off of this retractable cord that takes the camera's weight. And that way it allows you to, especially if you're doing products, it allows you to go in and go down and close in on a product without being stuck with a certain height of a camera rig. And it takes the weight, puts the weight of the camera on the person's lower back, and so it relieves all that. Yeah, it's easier to move amongst a crowd if it's attached to you and hanging. Just don't go through any low doors.
And by the way, if you just as a there's the picture of the rig in the middle of nowhere. So those are the bolts over his head, and then there's the rig that he's looking at, and then of course we're recording to and embedding audio in the pics. All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Sky Gleason in Seattle. For me, the NAB Office Hours live event was a lab of what could be possible. What was each of the remotes, camera, audio kit, and signal path?
Go ahead, Noah.
So for powers, we did have a Android phone that shot 8K, and the camera basically spun around. I'm sure Jeffrey knows the model, and I don't. And he had a little cage on it, which he had a light hanging off of it, and then he had a handheld mic. And again, I don't know any of the brands and the names of it. I'm sure he will. So hit him up. Oh yeah, and Josh, if you want to pin him, he's got some B-roll of the behind-the-scenes stuff he shot just pre-show. So for Keithley, he wasn't expecting to travel with gear. So, we, plan A was Guy, and obviously we had moved to plan B. So we hit up as many people as possible. Preto came in for the win with an A7 III and some audio gear. So that was a last minute addition, like Sunday morning scrambling to make that work. So there you have it.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Well, the reason I asked the question is because as a laboratory, we have the science of the YouTube video, and I would hope that we could look at, okay, when Jeffrey is doing, we also had to change the names. When Powers is doing an event, we know what equipment he's using and what worked and what didn't in the moment. Thank you for sharing. And then when the other 1F Jeff, Keithley, and that was the other challenge, is naming them, because we had 2 Jeffs. That would be a recommendation, George, is to not have 2 reporters from the field have the same name. It's very confusing for everybody.
Very complicated. Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
I jokingly said that we need a swear jar. So if you say Jeff or Jeffrey, you contribute to the swear
Well,
jar.
Noah's going to send me to NAB next year because of all the money that he put in that jar.
We once had a production. We had 3 Kevins on staff and 1 client named Kevin. It was a lot of Kevins. Next question.
We've covered a lot of this, but George Butter says yesterday's coverage of NAB was daring, got better by the minute, was amazing, but struggled with one persistent issue, field sound. What's the fix for the next big one?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I think Carl already recommended the best recommendation is the crew of 3 with somebody with a mixer, and then the handheld mic would seem to work the best. But also I wanted to note that Guy also was going to bring a T-bar and have 2 cameras mounted up on that system, and to have 2 cameras from himself as the lone reporter in the field. So there's imagination is running wild.
Yeah, and I would rather have fewer field folks that are better equipped than more field folks that are less equipped. So we just have to figure that out too. And I think that a SF58 with a electrosonic mic plug to mix some kind of sound devices into the camera is kind of where I would probably go. Next question.
Alex 40 Goldner in London says, thoughts on this? The Audio Design Desk's new DAW bridge syncs any DAW to Final Cut Pro. Use a Pro Tools or Logic Pro timeline to create pro audio within your video editing workflow. And he's got a link there for it.
I think we're so into maybe ask that question again tomorrow in the first hour. I think we're so into I think we've gotten into the mode of we're just going to do a postmortem here today. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. I know this is probably or possibly overlaps with other questions, but what were the main challenges you encountered from the live broadcast, lessons learned, and what to do differently next time?
Go ahead, Noah.
Time was our biggest challenge for sure. Just being short on time, not having paid people. So it's like, hey, could you be here at this time? Actually, no, I can be there 2 hours later, or, what have you, stuff like that. Rehearsals obviously are huge. We tried to do a few on Sunday, but we didn't have the ground crew at rehearsals, which could have made a huge difference to flesh out the systems, specifically around the ground hardware, right? To know what's coming in, all that kind of stuff, since we got it so last minute. Again, it all revolves around time. Sky, do you want to do the quote of what was the 3 things, and you can only have 2, and then with volunteers?
Quality, price, time.
Time, quality, and resources. Yeah, that's my TKR.
And then with volunteers, you only get 1.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, pretty well summed up. A lot of it was we tried to model everything because of the short time zone, short time path, at least as close to what people were used to, and then try to communicate those changes. Some communication worked better than others, but that was where it kind of what we're used to and what we're doing and what we need to augment to just communicate that. That's where we could have done better.
Good, Sky.
What I observed was finding patterns and rhythms, staying within the sandbox that we had been living in the last year and a half. But again, Liberty and I were able to start connecting with, we're starting to seeing patterns. Okay, let's just repeat. We do a video, we do a callback, we do a response, and some of that we had rehearsed, but a lot of it we evolved after the second event of a playback, and Liberty and I kind of got into rhythm.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
It'd be useful to have some methodology worked out in an RF hostile environment like NAB to know if your signal is dropped, so that you don't keep going and waste important content unknowing that your signal is no longer going out. Perhaps the comms coming in over a separate transmission path would be good, so that the presenter has a comms in his ear, so someone could say, your signal has dropped, hold for a second until it comes back.
And that's one of the challenges also with being a lone person feeding into a live system without that return. Although I think there's some software that we may be able to use in the future for that. Go ahead, Bill.
I just thought it was amazing that it came off like it did. And I think that there are a lot of lessons. Everybody on this crew was used to this and used to going out. The fact that there was so much brain power and production smarts to pull this off with this little resources was astonishing.
Go ahead, Liberty.
And super quick, just if there were more resources, so this is down the line, is just maybe a researcher. So they're pulling stuff from social, social or things, any updates, and then that being fed to us as hosts and anchors.
And I think that that's going to be an opportunity. I'm going to put up a thing for everybody here. If you're interested in Cinegear as well, those are the kind of resources that I think people could volunteer to be. I can't go, but I want to be part of it. So there's a form there that I just put in the chat. We'll put it out later in the email. That's for Cinegear. And so if you're interested in Cinegear, let us know as far as building teams. And this doesn't mean you have to be here. So as you can see, we have people all over the world working on the show, and so there'll be a couple opportunities to be part of the next one. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, just about there was actually a plan for a social media operator. One of the things that planned and didn't launch, but yeah.
Right. And I think that one of the things that I notice is that as someone who's done, again, probably 20 or 30 of these at least, is that a lot of times what I do is I walk through, I pick about a bunch of stuff, I shoot a bunch of little videos, and I have notes. I have literally a notes column of the stuff I want to cover. And then the last day of the event, I would wander through with one person on a live view and there was no overhead. And I had one person talking in my ear, and then people in Pixel Core would just call out questions, and the person would just read them into me. So we want to think about, and the reason I say that is that we want to think about how to keep it simple. It's not that you don't have time, but you have to pull your elbows in and just delete things that you're not going to have time to do. And so I think that it doesn't have to be as complicated. It's going to get better as you add more infrastructure, but you have to make sure that you have the people and time for it. And right now we have enough for Cinegear, which is why we're going to see what people want to do. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, did we ever find out what the manufacturer's suggested retail price of the Magewell USB Fusion was?
Does anyone know? Knowing Magewell, I'll say $449.
Yeah, I want to say that it was $9.99 because the UK CVP already has it up, and it's like a European price. But when I translated it, it comes to $1,035 US. Right. So it should be about it.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. Next question.
Alex Golner in London says, could we convince a sponsor to fund our coverage of IBC or NAB next year, and would that fit office hours?
Go ahead, Noah.
So I won't speak to the office hours part of it, but we did talk about trying to collect a sponsor for doing this stream specifically, and I actually was talked out of it by wiser people. And it comes down to this: we're still prototyping, we're still iterating and figuring this out. So from a sponsor's perspective, we probably would not have had a good relationship by the end of the stream. I mean, for what we're developing and building, yeah, we accomplished great things, but it's still super early in that process.
Yeah, yesterday was a huge success for us as a proof of concept. It would have been a disaster as a sponsored event. Now, we might have better equipment to do that, but it would have been rough, And as what was probably brought up to is that bringing money into it gets really complicated really quickly. And the reality is, we had sponsors for. Before we were even a nonprofit, we had sponsors for NAB the last time it canceled. I had a room in the LVCC, and lots of other things. We just, this one came up too quickly to do that kind of thing. But we can absolutely do that in the future. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, talent and equipment pool was very wide because we did not have sponsors, but it also meant we had to work with what we had, and also the talent. We tried to fit the square pegs in the square holes and the round pegs in the round holes, and we're getting a lot better at that. But I want to mention, Jeffrey said, CES, he's ready to have us come and follow him around in CES, and that's January.
Go ahead, Carl.
The one thing where I think sponsors could fit in is in the record. So if we're recording everything locally while we're streaming, don't sponsor the stream because the stream may fail, so sponsor one like that. But the records that may go up later, like these edited sponsors, you can actually have these nice edited clips that are 5-7 minutes long for each booth. Those ones can be sponsored with a lower third, saying sponsored by yada yada. So that may work because you can actually control the quality of records that go up maybe 24 hours later versus a live stream.
And I think that usually the way we'll probably do this is some quiet sponsors that just want to help us do what we're doing, and then potentially some in-kind sponsors that will give us the equipment that we need. You got to get how quickly I would do this. I would go on to the NAB, and I would literally just walk up to Electrosonics, and they'd hand me. I said, "Can I borrow can I borrow a mic plug and a receiver?" And they'd give me one, and then I'd go over to Countryman, which is right next to it, and Chris would give me a headset, and then I'd go do the show, and then I'd come back and hand it back to them. And what that comes from is doing it over and over again. So the thing is that you could get to a point where you can live off the land in some ways. Now we don't want to do that, but the point is that came from relationships that were built over a decade. And so the thing is that by doing these every 3 or 4 months, we'll get to a point. I mean, I think that we're 2 or 3 activations away from being the best coverage of any conference ever, like at the rate, at what we did there, and so I think that we have the opportunity to do that. But I think that, again, what we want to do is have sponsors pay, eventually pay maybe the hotel rooms and the flights. What we don't want to get, as soon as we go into like, how do we turn this into something that generates revenue, and we have to pay everybody to do it, and it'll become a small team, and then it will be anemic and painful. And that's what I've worked on for many years. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and that anemic and painful is the challenge that Chris Fenwick and I discussed. Maybe there's an opportunity for a camp concept where you have to have people in certain positions that are going to be paid, but then others want to volunteer and be a part of the experience as volunteers. So everybody knows their roles, but also you got to have professionals in the certain roles that are able to give a time before the event, and then other people just want to come along for the ride. Maybe there's an opportunity
somewhere down the road. If we start having real sponsors, then it's real money, and maybe potentially. But I think that I've done a lot. I mean, without that, and I think that we just want to be very careful when we start adding money to the whole thing. The whole thing gets. It's why I've been so careful about not taking money. It's because I just know that it changes all the math really, really fast. And so us doing this is we all come together, we all figure it out. The first thing I want to do is try to cover hotels and flights and, gear like that. That's where the first money, I'm just to be totally transparent with everybody. That's where money will go. If people give us money to do this, it'll go to making sure that people can get there, people can stay there. We have gear, we have food, we have those kinds of things. And then we'll figure out the other parts down the road, but it'll be a long way away. Because we can play a game that no one else, can play, so next question is from, sorry. I was in Sunday mode. Go ahead, Bill.
It's okay. Alex Gollner in London. Will you or we do the same at IBC from Friday the 9th to Monday the 12th September? Show hours are 0900 to 1800 Zulu.
I didn't realize it was so early, but I think we should. I think that, again, the one that I'm interested in is SIGGRAPH, but if we're doing Cinegear, SIGGRAPH may come up too early, but we can decide if there's someone who wants to do a rig in Vancouver, but we'll see what we can do there. But I think that I think we definitely should do something and I actually think that eventually we want to do this 8 hours a day, every day that the expo's opened. I mean, that's where we want to get to. Go ahead, Noah.
And I think it'll get easier and easier the more we do. The process will become more clear and more streamlined. In the beginning, it's a lot of work because you're building the boat. But then once you're on the water, you're cruising. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, office hour. Remember that a year ago we were talking about building Office Hours 2.0, and we limped through it for WWDC. And now we do it every day, it's, and we don't think about it. So it's, things will get better. Well, and the more times we can do it. And again, we're going to look at all kinds of things that we can cover. It might even be a parade. It might be another, a more amateur launch than what we had there before, but looking for things, it just needs enough people saying they want to do it for us to just decide, let's go do that. Go ahead, Noah.
Do we have an events calendar that we can do? And the thought of behind that is like these major events that we want to cover, like possibly putting that on the calendar and start organizing
definitely
people.
Someone should just see if Ken's able to do that, or if people are following along with Ken, or following on, or how we can help him. But putting it on the website would be fun, of the events that we want to.
I just want to say, having Noah say building a boat, that sounds like success is right there already.
Yeah, no.
Just saying.
Again, I will say, the way to get better is you pay attention, you mind the gap, right? You mind the gap from where you are to perfection, but you always have to be able to give yourself the ability to fail forward, and what I will say is yesterday was a massive success. Like, it was not a failure. It was a massive success. There were lots of little tweaks and everything else, but the fact that in 2 weeks we put something together that, again, I got multiple comments from people who know this have seen a lot of these that said this is more compelling than the other streams that I'm looking at, around NAB. And even with all, like, the first is the worst, and all of the, everything is, we just kind of figured it out and survived it. And there was a lot of things that we will improve on, and we want to constantly focus on those. But we just have to realize that we struck something really hard there, and we'll keep on going down that path. Next question.
Guy Mador in Dacula, Georgia says, is there an available schematic of the interconnected systems and workflow used for the Office Hours NAB coverage?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, and I'll toss it to Josh here in a second to show the actual visuals to help support this. But we did have a Google Doc, and we did have a routing sheet, so to speak, of the different positions and stuff. I will say too, this was such an iterative process that we redid this several times in a row. And once Josh shows that sheet, I can jump back in and show the Google Doc as well.
Go ahead, Josh.
And here it is. So yeah, general outline from our field contributors and the control room setup, how we were able to organize things, what the responsibilities and relationships were. There was some mild graphing about where the Unity intercoms, what channels needed to be connected, and down at the bottom is our familiar office hours. So plugging into, this is basically like an office hours API where we plugged in the augmented portions into the existing formats and modified some of the roles. So for example, the TD would be taking directions from the show caller, and they would be in the air with the Unity comms. The question manager would be doing the regular job, but there was a Mukana coordinator where we were curating. Didn't know that we had some moderation things in the background, but that would be helpful for next time. But then we were able to have a couple of different paths. We have a stopover from our reporters, field reporters with their producers into an intermediary Zoom room, which we reserved for if they dropped. We decided to take a chance with a low latency connection coming directly in for a regular participation. However, we did have another contributor who could not get in, and we used that system. It was Guy's contact that we used, and actually not too bad a connection and a conversation with that. So yeah, some redundancy built in, and just an overall look at how we were looking at things.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
But there's one thing I'm looking for maybe in the future. This is kind of like a really bizarre way of putting it, but now that the iPhone supports 16:9 for Zoom connections, could you have it so you could actually just have the iPhone itself on a little, selfie stick, stabilized essentially? Okay, you want a camera operator, you don't want your producer or your question asker holding it, and that iPhone just directly goes in, just using 5G or 4G. It directly goes and pushes 1080 into like we all are right now coming into Zoom. I'm just wondering, and the good thing about the iPhone is, or even an Android phone, but the iPhone is with the 3.5 to Lightning adapter, you can actually pump like audio in from a MixP 3 or just mixer, and you can actually just give it line level, so you can actually bring in high quality audio because you can turn on original sound, you can do all that stuff in the iPhone. But the only thing why we didn't do the iPhone is because it was always 4:3, but now we can do 16:9.
Well, it's not the only reason you don't do it. I mean, for those of us who've done a lot of stuff in Vegas, Vegas is a disaster when it comes to cellular coverage, especially in. Doesn't
Zoom just lower the quality down to like 320?
Yeah,
it's mainly the audio.
I'm talking about I can't text in the central hall. Like it's not like it's a disaster, and so I think that if we go to LVCC, I think that our situation will be very different because the cellular coverage is way better there. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, that actually was Jeffrey Power's system. Now he used a Ethernet directly into the phone, but he was using the 16.9 720p contribution from his Asus Zenfone.
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, and we had for Cyber Rodeo, we had just a single SIM card in, the giant Giga facility that was 11 million square feet. So that was definitely a good test. And after that test, we're like, no, we need some sort of bonded multi-SIM system. So that's why Mr. Net was one of our partners. And obviously we use the LiveView as well to do whatever connection we can. And just based off the feedback we got from several people, we wanted to try to, boost that the best we could. But I want to quickly show the Google Doc as well, if that's okay. So I'm going to share my screen now. You'll see this is our main page with the different tabs of what we had. So assets were the stuff that we're tracking as far as the editing packages. Credits is who's the who. Links is out to the different URLs. We did have a run of show, which I can click through these as well. Then the thing that we'll do better next time is we try to have Team Keithley and Team Powers basically look at these Google Docs, and I refresh that with the questions in real time. We'll do that directly through Mukana next time. And then we also had that that 10,000 foot overview that Josh showed as well. But just to quickly click through these tabs, it's the things you would expect on each one of these tabs, where assets have the packages that we're working on and links to that, and credits have everybody who is involved, and Unity comms. Those obviously we've skipped over the connections there, but links and the run of show. This was an ever moving document with all of the different elements that were color coded, and I was adjusting this on the fly. And so we had two coordinators, Taluk and Ryan, who were basically coordinating with Keith Lee and Powers and helping us update this in real time of who's who and where. And then specifically for the ground crew, they were looking at this doc, like I said, for the questions that I copy pasted in. Okay.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, and I think that, especially like a rig like this one that this was suggested by Tom Ferguson and that I've been playing with, but this has got quarter 20s on every side. To build a kit around it would be relatively straightforward. And I think that the best situation that we would have is potentially one or two big kits that have real cameras and everything else that's there that are doing the main interviews, and many smaller kits that just are capturing. And a lot of them don't even have to be interviews. There's so many of those booths, like we were shooting Wheatstone, which I didn't care about, but on the back behind Wheatstone was zero density. And I was like, why can't we you don't even need to interview anyone. Like, zero density is so cool, and so the thing is, I was like, go over there. So being able to have stuff that just shows things, it just shows presentations and just shows examples. You could just literally cut to make it easy and fast, to go and show things that we're interested in. Let's go to the next question. We're out of time. I'm going to try to cut through a couple of these.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. Will there be an office hours presence at NAM?
Go ahead, Carl.
I'd like to see that, but friend of the show, Nick Batt, goes to NAM a lot too. So,
go ahead, Noah.
NAM is 10 minutes for me, so I hope so. I've actually never been.
I am happy to add NAM to it, although we have NAM and Cinegear on the same week. So we would have, and WWC. so that would be a very busy. It would be a very busy time for us to try to do all of those things at one time. Although I think that NAM might happen right before it. Is it 3 to 5? So NAM might be the weekend before, so we could theoretically, that would be, we are doing something for DubDub. We don't know exactly what we're doing, but we'll definitely be doing things for DubDub. We'll know more in a week or two. And then we are, so we're definitely doing stuff for DubDub. I really think Cinegear is so much fun to go to, and I would love to cover NAM. So if there's enough people to cover it, and literally, I don't care if it's just one team that's just going to bounce around and, to make that work. Next question.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. During the coverage, someone spoke about how Jeffrey's rig was drawing a lot of attention. I'd be curious about what was especially unusual about his rig. For example, was the grid view of panelists visible during questions?
No.
It was visible because he was able to spin that camera around, but I would definitely ask this question again the next time Jeffrey Powers is on the panel.
Yeah, and one thing that I will say is that we've done this for other things, and I think that we could get to this point where we have an iPad or something sitting right below. Like, we can really build these rigs out if we have enough time to design it. We have an iPad or even a screen with a B-Link by Courtney that is sitting underneath the camera where people can actually ask the questions directly. And we've done this at like weddings where, we had a wireless setup and where people, the panelists could literally ask the person the question that they want to ask. And I think that that's not an undoable thing. I've done it in the past. So it's doable. It's under cellular. I haven't done it. So we have to check that out. Go ahead, Dennis.
I think it was his lovely pink rucksack.
Very good. Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman is up next. For the anchors, did you miss bidirectional communications with the reporters?
Go ahead, Noah.
Anchors, feel free to jump in. Jeffrey had the two-way, but so Powers did, but Keith Lee did not because he was missing some hardware.
Real quick, Bill.
A little bit, but not too much. It was so busy and there were so many things going on. It would have been a nice ad, but it would have been just an ad, not a big core.
Next question.
Sam Greenwood in Toronto. What's a good audio interview for use in situations where non-professionals are going to be controlling the system?
Go ahead, Courtney.
If you're looking for an example of somebody who does a good audio interview, Huelhauser, the late Huelhauser, did Visiting, and he did several other shows with just himself and Luis Fuerte, his cameraman. And these were PBS shows that had national coverage. And it was amazing. He would interview people all over the world and did a great job with a single handheld mic.
Yeah, and when you look at news, generally news is a reporter and a camera operator. Like we see it all. When I was in DC, all the news organizations from Europe were in the same building, and they would all be standing outside. It was always two people. Like it was just very rarely more than two to cover these things. Next question.
George Butters, Halifax, Nova Scotia. What other events, considering going back to in person, will take from the turnout at NAB?
Go ahead, Bill.
I was really disappointed in the turnout, to be honest with you. I really thought more people were going to come back. There were just a large number of holes from what I'm experiencing. I understand the pandemic was there and things like that, but I think people are coming back slower, and I think they have to rethink the nature of this to pull more people in. Some of those huge booths look pretty sparse.
It is super important that conventions pivot right now. They won't, but it's super important. Most of them won't. But it's important for them to build digital first experiences, not hybrids, but when you're in the same space and you have all those people, build a digital version of your event and make sure that it's super high quality and get ready for the future. Because what always happens is people hang on to the past too long and then they don't have anywhere to go into the future because it's already past them. This happened to magazines. I mean, I've told the story. I told magazine folks in 2002, like you take all your subscribers and move them digitally, and people literally laughed at me. And so they need to take what they have right now and move it into the future, or just hedge their bets of having something that's not hybrid, but truly a digital experience, truly designed for folks that are online. And if they don't, they're going to die. This is not everybody I'm talking to. Like manufacturers are trying to figure out whether it makes sense anymore. People don't want to travel as much as they used to for business. It's just the whole thing is kind of unwinding, and they just don't seem to be reacting fast enough. Next question.
Eric Nathan in Bellingham, Washington. What about putting together affiliate links that generates income from the purchases?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, that's one slice of the pie. So just remember that it does help, but there's several other ways of making money. And you can follow any YouTuber who talks about the finances behind YouTube. But that's one of many things.
It has been suggested, and I may think about building a Smile account for us now that we're a nonprofit, a Smile account where anything you order from Amazon, would some little amount would go to us, that's there. I'm not going to use affiliate links. I don't want to ever have people feel like I'm recommending things because I'm getting money out of it. So, I'm very opinionated about that. So, but we are thinking about, like putting a Smile account out so that if you're a member, you can just go into that account and order anything you want from Amazon, and we'll get something from it. And if other organizations do that, we'll do it with them as well. If I don't know who else does that, but other people. Next question.
Ben Cook in New York says, it has been amazing hearing about how it all came together for future events. If you're an AV tech and want to help out, who should I reach out to?
Go ahead, Noah.
I don't know about a single person. What happened though is I started with the people I knew, and that grew to the people they knew, and just snowballed from there. So being a part of office hours, getting on the panel, getting in conversations and after hours will get you started.
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
And come and join us on the back end. If you go to the office-hours-2-0 channel on Discord, then you'll find the spreadsheet to sign up for training at the weekends.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, typically these things are open invitations. Like if you see some softball questions like, hey, Noah, I heard about this event. You should ask them.
And I just put out a thing into the discussion about you can sign up for and we'll put up one for NAM as well to see if there's enough people that are interested in doing that. And again, if there's 3 people interested in doing NAM, we would do it. Like literally just Noah plus 1 or 2 other people to wander around NAM. We would go down that path. So it doesn't all have to be these giant productions to cover these things. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think we learn a lot and we meet a lot of people in a real way. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California, says, good end for RFI for audio. Not sure I understand
that. Carl?
So room for improvement could be like an MD46, which is a highly cardioid kind of one. And the presenter, producer, question asker, interviewer, that person, to have a cardioid headset. So Behringer now make one that's a cardioid shape, that's not Omni, and you can get higher end from Countryman, of course. So that way they're for comms and for a lot of other reasons too, but their mic is always the same distance, and then they can have a wired handheld to hand out for audio.
You go, Josh.
Yeah, Carl kind of touched on it, though. We had some interaction because the talking back and forth, headset's great for the talent and even for a speaker thing if you wind up being more than just a group or just a one person that you're speaking to.
Yeah, I will say that I've used a lot of different mics, and I just really love one handheld mic to do the thing. Like it seems to work the best. But we can keep on experimenting. I'm happy to be wrong. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. Good.
I didn't see you. The guy, did you have something to show? I didn't see your hand up.
I was about ready to head down there. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it. But I had popped open a MixPre 10, which has the advantage of the Hiroshi connection. So I had a Hiroshi to DTAP, so I could power this thing forever. And then I had, for me, in my bag of tricks, I had the HD25 high noise headset that gives me the mic. But then I also have the Rode Reporter, so I can reach out and get right in front of somebody. And then I can flip the ear on this thing. So if I need, it turns to the side like that, so you can flip it up if you need to hear.
And I think that what we ought to do is keep experimenting. So, I have an opinion about it, but I don't think we should standardize on my opinion or anybody else's. I think that we might have 2 or 3 crews. Some things will say, let's all do the same cameras or let's all do the same whatever. But I think that we should keep on experimenting with, like, what is it like if we use this and what if we like, and then we can all discuss whether we like it or not and keep learning. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. Good and room for improvement for the boots on the ground crew.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Alex already touched on this. A great thing to have would be a tablet or something in front of the cameraman, and a method for the boots on the ground people to have of getting the panel to be able to ask an immediate question that could be routed directly to that. The panelists could ask it directly if they had an audio feed. I don't know if they could be heard or not, but that might be a way. Or if not that, just a way for the person doing the interview having a tablet or a phone that would pop up a question that is immediate. So the panel needs a way to say, ask this question and not go into a line in Mukana and wait till the interview's over.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I've talked about this before, but 3 people having one person maybe that's focused just on sound, one person that's focused on camera, and then the interview itself. The other thing with the iPad is you can actually probably put a clamp onto the monopod of the camera, and the iPad is facing the talent, facing the people, and that just has big text, as you said, Alex. You can just have the question take over the entire screen, so they can just look at that iPad because they're looking towards the camera, and then actually see the question, so they know there's a question. They can actually read it like a teleprompter in a way.
We actually have a teleprompter view for Mukana, so that we can just pass it, send it out there as well. Go ahead, Guy. Nope, can't hear you.
Yeah, for boots on the ground, that's actually what I had built out with a Triad Orbit rig, and it had an iPad, it had 2 iPads, so that you could just roll it in, and it had batteries down at the bottom, USB-C running up, so I could power for if we went into overtime, so to speak, because we were powering for 3 hours, and so I had, you wouldn't believe the amount of battery power that I had. I mean, I had DTAPs, I had 12 of the NP style batteries. I mean, I was ready to rock and roll, and then backup internet. So there's a lot to it. I mean, having all the providers having hotspots, my iPad has built-in cellular, but then I also had AT&T hotspot, and I was borrowing a T-Mobile, and then I was going to get another one. So to have 3, and then being able to Ethernet, Wi-Fi plus built-in cellular, that's 3 just on the iPad. So, and that's a nice way too, because then the noise cancellation on an iPad is nice, because then the person on the ground can hear. If you wanted to just turn the volume up, you have this built-in speaker, which is nice, so they can hear right away. But then I also had the bigger cameras just in case we wanted to go out through the laptops. I had the larger, I had a Z cam and a Sony. So here was the other rig. So an SDI, if I was to feed in a Keith Lee's rig, I would have used this Vaxis SDI transmitter and transmitted directly in, so he could have been broken off from me, and then this would have been the whole rig. I mean, well, with the MixPre, with the audio being sent in, so I would have had wireless audio coming into this.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
You go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, when we had to ask the question for Guy, can you really make the effort because you've got COVID? And it's like, oh, but I've got all this great, amazing gear, and we all kind of lusted after it. But it was a really hard choice. And again, Guy, thank you for your health. That's priority. But the other question I was going to add to this, or not, how do we also engage and plan the interviews? Because we found ourselves a couple of times, both reporters would find themselves finding somebody to talk to at exactly the same moment. So we had to put somebody on pause. And so to have that interaction, and apologies for having to make one of them had to wait. And that was challenging.
Yeah. I mean, what I've done in the past, we can do whatever we want to do, but what I've done in the past is I usually have one person in front of me going to the next booth that I'm going to, we're bringing a crew here in 5 minutes and we want to know if you're available. And that person says yes or no. And if they're not, we just go somewhere else, or I just go and cover it. So I would just go and do it. If there wasn't someone standing there, I would literally just walk up and talk about why, because I get to a booth knowing exactly what I want to say, and I have only middle interest in talking to someone about it. If I don't have an engineer to answer questions of the audience, I don't want to talk to a salesperson. I just want to talk to, I'll just explain why I'm here. So about 80% of the time, I don't interview anybody. Like I just talk about what I want to talk about in this area. If I have someone good, then we open it up for questions, but it's got to be like engineering level, someone to answer questions.
We had Michael Cioni. We had couple of rock stars yesterday. It was amazing.
Right. And that's also why you want to have it be, you want spacers in there of other cameras that are just shooting. Like, again, you could have just taken a camera and pointed it at zero density for a little while, and then we cut to it for a little while. You get to see a little bit of it, and then we go somewhere else. So those could be phones that are floating around that are just grabbing data. Because one of the things that in live that I think people overlook is creating spacers that can be cut away from at any point in time. So one of the things I'm obsessive about is I shoot tons and tons of time lapses on live events because I can always cut to them. And I can leave them up as long as I want and then just cut away. So having things where we have cameras that we can just point at, you can have a couple cameras wandering around, just point, even banking it, where you just kind of, you could bank a whole bunch of things that we just kind of cut to when we need a space. But you got to find things that create spaces, and live events do that. They create things that create spaces. And then now you have something like, okay, I don't have 32 seconds to do, I don't know where I'm going to go next. I don't have to commit to another 3-minute segment. I can put something up for just a second. People can watch it for a little bit, and we can talk a little bit amongst ourselves and then come back. And even talking amongst ourselves is part of creating those spaces. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and speaking about some of the happenings, something so that our talent can get a feedback. One of the focuses in this community particularly is that feedback. One of the favorite parts I liked on the event is when the Frame.io booth, and he was like, "Hey, is that Bill there?" So
right.
Getting that interaction is pretty cool. So maybe something with a monitor, maybe a speaker, if need be, to hear who's on the other end.
I definitely think for the quote unquote big rigs, we should figure out it's either an iPad or a monitor that has our folks, on it. Go ahead, Liberty.
Yeah, and time was a constraint for us, but having them listed, like these interviews in advance, always help when we've done Essence. And as Alex said, is just talking about the booth, like talk about what's happening. That's what your audience is looking for. And just that prep, even though I said with a research team, but that prep of we are going to hit these and having that fail-safe plan. If nobody shows up, here's what we're going to be able to say and talk about. So it was a time constraint for us, but yeah.
Did you do segments at Essence?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a machine. That's actually where I learned to do the spacers. I have great time lapses from Essence Festival. Anyway, it's good festival. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, one of the hopes we had was to have packages pre-built like Sunday for the next day, right? So you would hit them with a package and the product and all the details, and then you go to a live interview where you have that interactivity. That didn't quite work how I envisioned, primarily because of the time and how things hit, and the crew that we had for editing was only 3 people, right? So we did do about a dozen packages, but we had to use them in other ways. So that would have been a huge thing to shape and build. And then obviously the interactivity. But Guy also had a great idea for an establishing shot, an exterior of the building. We never got that. And then boots on the ground team of 3+ would be huge, and an earpiece for both the interviewer and interviewee.
Yeah. One thing, I was watching some of the segments that were not shot on the ground. I think I would have rather had us have slides and then have someone just talk over them. Like it would take a lot of your effort away. Like I would focus my editing effort on the show floor. And then I would take the things that are just information about here's what happened, and have the hosts given the notes and us just throw up some slides like what Carl does and just talk about this was announced. And then because then we can talk about it a little bit more. We can kind of stop and start and talk through it a little bit, as opposed to a thing. I felt like it was a lot of work that we could have just read out, and I think that might have made it would have taken some load off of the edit team to not have to produce those. Next question.
Next one comes to Noah Sargent in Fullerton. Good and room for improvement for cameras.
Good guy.
Yeah, I think Courtney said it earlier with the easy rig over the top. And then with these cameras, you got the servo zoom. That's always nice as opposed to just having the DSLR style lenses. So you can do those nice creep zooms. But then you can also get over the top of something. And then you'll notice that the sound guy in this shot, he's underslunging his boom pole and he's getting, right underneath somebody. So in this day of COVID and not having to touch the mic and not putting things in people's ears, I think that an open speaker, if possible, so that they could hear some instructions from our side, but we need a mix minus, of course, so that it doesn't feed back into the system. But I like this setup right here. And again, this is one of the shows, so we know what the people are doing that are getting paid the big bucks to do this. So I think the easy rig with a nice like Canon C500 or FS7, one of the new style cameras that have good autofocus with a servo lens.
Go ahead, Noah.
I think conceptually we have to decide whether we're going to do scrappy crews, right, with minimum things and iPhone rigs versus the full built rigs. And as someone who owns like a dozen plus cameras, like I said earlier, I would lean towards the heavy production side, but I also understand where our restrictions are and our side of production. But I have to say this question and the others with the room for improvement was like, there's probably a dozen subjects that we could talk about. And obviously we're over on time, but thank you everybody for all your great feedback. And I do want to call out one person particularly. Jonas kind of fell on his own sword and made a sacrifice for the bigger crew because it was his suggestion to move away from the Cyber Rodeo build and go to the 2.0 as a full infrastructure. And that kind of took away from him and his responsibility. But Jonas is such a powerful and great engineer that I was just impressed by him to make the sacrifice and be like, we don't need to do it my way. We can do it the other way and that will work better, So I just want to thank him specifically. And obviously everybody who's been a part of this show.
And again, massive success. I mean, just incredible work by everybody in putting this together. So looking forward to the next one. Look for events that we want to do. Again, these events don't all have to be NAB or CES or NAM or Cinegear. I think NAM and Cinegear are both. I thought NAM was earlier. I think it used to be earlier, so I thought we were already past it. But I think that if we found 3 people that want to do it, I would do at least a second hour or two on it. So it doesn't have to be big coverage. It can be like, hey, we're at NAM. We're going to wander around for an hour and show stuff. And if there's 6 people that want to do it, then we'll have 6 people do it. And if there's, it doesn't have to be like one thing I want to be careful about is us not creating so much weight that we can't do any shows. So, if there's a show where there's a handful of people that want to cover it, let's figure that out and let's do it well, but it doesn't have to be done big, and this is a good example where I got incredible amount of positive feedback on something that we just kind of threw together. I mean, I know it was a lot of work, but I mean, it wasn't, we didn't have the gear that we wanted. We didn't have, all the stuff, the people, we had COVID, we had all kinds of other things happen. And I still got great comments. And so there's something that we're doing that's working. And I think that part of it was that it was fresh. And I think that we want to look at what other people are doing, but we don't want to learn too much. I think that we want to keep on evolving. And I think that we can do a mixture of these things, a big heavy rig. I want to get to a point again, and if we keep on doing these and we keep on doing them well, we will get sponsors, we will get space, we will get things because we're able to progress. What we had proposed for NAB before it was first canceled in 2021 was we're going to have a studio where we can bring people in to show their products. We're going to have people roaming around, grabbing video, then some live roamers and everything else. That's what I think where we can get to very quickly. The key is for us to, if we're going to start taking money from people or we're going to start asking for hardware, we just have to tune it up. We don't want to start asking for things until we know we can nail it. And I think that another couple of these, 2 or 3 more of these, I think we're going to get really good at it, as a group. So just incredible work by everybody. And I'll put the link. It's in Mukana, but I'll put it into an email out to everybody tomorrow. If you're interested in Cinegear, I'll put another one out for NAM. We'll see if we can gather. Again, 2 or 3 people is all that we need to cover something. So, and we'll build up around that. But if you're again, there's also opportunities to do it virtually or in person. You don't have to be here to do it. It's the best part of this. Thanks to our producers. Great questions, great conversation. Really, really good job. And thanks to our panelists. We can't do this without you. It's so good to see all of you here today. So it's fantastic. So thanks for joining us. And now we're going to jump into After Hours. Hi, Keenan.
Let the whispering begin.
How are you doing, Keenan? Aren't you having a good time watching our show? I almost hit leave and start.
Mitch Hill's got fingernails on chalkboard.
Those are the credits from Sunday. They're not today's credits.
What did we run yesterday after the show?
Oh, there's the logo.
The real ones.
This is the part where we leave.
Still have the Solana transversal. That was a weird credit.
Chad was in the room. And JJ.